save it as more appropriate to talk about then. Does anyone else have correspondence or announcements? All right. Then we'll move on to administrative reports. Then the first item will be the superintendent's report.
Okay, so I have two items noted in the written report. With regard to strategic planning, we did begin the process last evening. We had our entire administrative team meet with our facilitators, Jack Linehan and Joanne Sternke. We met for 2 hours, and I will provide the board later a more detail. I'll give you a copy of the PowerPoint that we used and some follow-up information, but it was really just a kickoff to talk about where the district has been in the past with its planning, identifying, what some of our what we saw as strengths, and not necessarily just looking at things like student achievement, but overall procedurally about how we do things as a district. We talk about things like communication and process and where we had our strengths and opportunities in the process part to kind of set the groundwork before we move forward. So it was again that almost a pre-planning meeting to find out where we're at and the fact that we have a number of administrators with significant amount of experience in the district. We have a number of administrators with very little, and about learning about the history and the work that's been done so it can inform that work we do move forward. So I thought it was an excellent first step. We have an administrative team meeting tomorrow. We'll be following up discussion with it. And then as we start the actual planning process, we have not set any dates at this point. We'll be doing that within the next couple of weeks. And then I'll certainly keep the board informed of the process. And then as it moves beyond the administrative team and involving all of our other stakeholders, we'll report on that as well in the very near future.
Dan, I'm sorry, I totally apologize for not being back in here right away. Are you talking about the strategic plan?
Yes.
Process?
Yeah.
I just kind of want to go on record that, and I probably did miss some of the things you're saying, and I totally apologize for that. I'm just a little off base because of closed session. What I have here is strategic plan update. We'll be meeting with the entire administrative team March 10th.
Right.
I think a critical piece is that all the board members be involved also be involved in that formation process. And maybe what we need is a working session to do that with both those people. Again, part of our job is full oversight on this and full support, and then part of our job is reaching out to the community to talk about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And not totally understanding how you're seeing this process, but as I read it, it sounds like you guys are going to do the pre-planning and the development, and then maybe come to us and what it says is report out. That is not how I see this process. I see this process as a collaborative, interactive, and ideally, and we talked about this in a previous experience where in retrospect we said we should have all been in the room together having this conversation. I would advocate for a meeting with administration and the board and the 2 consultants to work out this process so that collaboratively we're all on the same page and we're all together as we build it and make it happen. And then we all go out into the community, and now you've got twice as many people who are saying, this is what we want, this is how we want to make it work. One of the pieces that wasn't, I think could have been improved in the last process was there was a huge group that put a plan together. They came into the board and they said, okay, here it is, you got it. At which time the consultant, who I greatly respected, said, you assigned it to these people, so now you got it, you have to accept it. That isn't the piece I think we should be building. I think we should be building this collaboratively together, and we should be looking at doing it that way. So I'm just going to make that comment about that, and you guys can take it back and do whatever you want with it, but as you build a plan, I don't want to just come in and approve it. I think we're the community representatives here. We need to be a part of that because we represent the community, and what the communities feel is about what this school district is and what it should be. So that's what I thought.
Thank you.
Dean?
I would second Susan's proposal because I would feel a lot better being a part of the process at the beginning, rather than being given a fait accompli at the end to say up or down on a vote after months of work, which oftentimes board members will say you've done all the work. My last two bits won't matter, or it's too late. So I think that needs to be thought about.
Anybody else? I guess, could I just ask how, because you said all the board members, and because this is going to be during the day and be fairly lengthy, that would put a burden on some board members, may not be able to do it. Would it satisfy you? I mean, we'll talk about this more, but if board members who were able to attend that come to it and represent the others, I mean, I think realistically, thinking that we'd have to find a time when all board members would be available would be very tough. And I'm speaking hypothetically, but if we proceed with this.
I think there are a variety of ways that you could do it if in fact you saw a piece of that getting together being collaborative. And so, for instance, administration can meet all day long and talk about the things that are really important to them that may be at a whole different level than we are. But then there's a point where we all come together and we say, okay, how do we build this district-wide community plan for a positive approach to the kids in the school district and improving their learning? And we want administration in that room with us to do that.
So now what I hear you saying.
So maybe they meet and we meet at the end of the day together.
Now what I hear you saying something different, which is maybe they meet and talk about how the board would be involved early on, which is a little different. So I don't know.
No, it wasn't how the board would be involved. I'm just saying,
I'm just trying to clarify.
maybe they start putting their thoughts together and then we all do it together. Or maybe we start in an evening and then we branch out. Maybe we begin with that work session all together in an evening.
Or whoever.
Well, I just want to make the comment if that we want to, and I agree with what you're saying, the spirit of what you're saying, Susan, but I think in agreeing with the spirit of what you're saying, you can't start that out in an exclusive way, in, you know, recognizing that some of our board members are at work during the day.
Right.
So,
well, I wasn't, and I'm trying to get a sense of whether everybody wants to be part of it or whether we think, I mean, this is something that they'll have to go back and talk to the consultants about in terms of their schedule too, because I assume they're planning on doing this every day. But if they could be available in the evening, perhaps on the same night where we would work with the whole board, or whether not everybody is interested in being part of it, that's what I was trying to hear. And so if you're saying that you would like to be, if possible, which would mean in the evening?
it's potential.
Okay.
I potentially would like to be involved, you know, if it's appropriate and handy and will work, but I don't want to start building a, you know, we're making a collaboration that out of necessity excludes half of our board from the get-go.
Right. Well, yeah, and I wasn't, but by saying representative, I wasn't thinking of it as exclusive, but if that's how you're going to look at it.
Well,
I mean, that's fair, it's a fair point.
You can spin it that way, but you can also look at it the other way.
It's a fair point, and let me hear Peter and then I'll come back to you.
I don't think we can resolve this here.
No.
No, well, no, but I'm trying to get.
What I would suggest is that at our next meeting, that Dan brings us forward the plan that he has in place for implementation, that we can review. At the same time, we can have a discussion how we want to participate. Because I'd like to see what you've got on the table, and then we can talk about our participation. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, do you want to?
Oh, absolutely, that's my intention all along. I just want to let you know that we had a first meeting.
Know that.
We didn't do any planning. It was made crystal clear a couple of months ago, we talked about this, that the board is an integral part of the stakeholders as well as teachers, and be part of the process. And of course, you're going to be, right now it's going to be on a Saturday, and you're all going to be invited.
Oh, well, that's correct, but I think the question, March 10th, is,
We met last night.
oh, you met last night.
Yeah, that was just to rehash what happened in your plan and where we're at.
Well,
But
okay,
you
I was
met
gonna say
in
next
the
meeting.
evening
That's
right.
and you met with administrators and we could have been there.
No,
That's,
we needed to meet as an administrative team.
see, I see that differently. Again,
Okay, well, it's too late for that, but that was what I thought, and I forgot the March 10th piece. So when you brought that up, Susan, I thought what you were asking was to be part of that meeting, which you're now saying is what you were asking.
And
so
we can
it's too
decide
late.
as a group
Well, it's
and
too late
agree
for that.
upon what our participation will be.
Right. No, I think that all makes sense. So anyway, it's a moot point because they already had a meeting. I wasn't focusing on the March 10th part. Sorry.
again.
So anyway, I think we have that resolved. So
Okay.
as much as will be resolved. So go ahead, next one.
All right.
Well, do we have
You're gonna get a report.
You're gonna we'll get a report on it at the next
Okay,
meeting.
so
just
that
had-
is,
I didn't have an
I'm
opportunity
really
to
not
put together.
seriously interested in that, I'd like to be a part of it. So
Well,
that's
right,
my
well,
response.
Right, got it, okay, next item.
Okay, MG 21 charter renewal. So they're in the 5th year of their charter agreement, the final year. We will be bringing a recommendation for renewal this spring. It expires June 30th. The reason I wanted to report now is that we do have a significant amount of work to do. What I've found is that back when the charter was initially authored 5 years ago, or 4.5 years ago, it was not reviewed by an attorney, and there are several concerns in the charter. Not the intent, the way the school is running is right on. We're not looking to change anything. It's been a fantastic experience. But the charter itself, we have some cleanup to do. And so we're in the process of doing that. And so when it does come to the board, it will essentially not change the operation of the school, but at least we'll have a legal charter for you to consider. So I've been in meeting with the governing board of MG21, meeting with their president tomorrow morning to go through some details. So the expectation is that we'll have a charter to their board for approval in April. We'll come to this board for first discussion in April and approval at the second April meeting. So that's the timeline now. If we need a little bit more time, May would be the latest to get that done. But like I said, it won't change the way the school operates, but we'll have the charter written the way it should be.
And maybe I'm just not remembering this well. Generally, we have we kind of have a presentation on MG21, and we usually have that before this happens, so that gives us a feeling for kind of where we are and the things they've seen that they need to do.
Right.
So then when they come in with the new charter, we already have a base for where we're working
Right.
from. So I think that would, I mean, I'm talking a 10-minute,
Right. But,
that is what we usually do.
right, and you had it this fall. There's an
Yeah,
annual
that's what it says.
presentation, and we already had it for this year.
We did that
But-
this year.
They weren't really talking about,
But well, they don't renew the charter every year, so the
Right.
charter presentation will incorporate some of that when they come in. They'll be talking about why they want to make the changes they want to make, if there are any, and that's where that does all become a piece of it, yeah.
So,
Okay.
okay.
All right, any other questions?
and then, I'm sorry, because I missed correspondence and announcements.
There were none.
Oh,
Oh, you
can I
had
just
one?
make one? I really, these two little
There's
boys
not
are
one
gonna be
anymore.
so seriously disappointed if I don't.
Sure.
But I really have to tell you, for those of you who were able to go to, and I wasn't able to go to the Black History celebration, I felt so badly about it, but oh my gosh, it just made your day going to the 4th grade science fair. I have never seen anything like this. The processes that they used and the systems that they used. Again, these kids can now go write that 7th grade science paper. This was absolutely amazing. And you couldn't get hung up on the questions they asked because they seemed often simple, like which of these vanilla ice creams will melt the fastest? But the scientific processes that they used were absolutely incredible. And I spent a significant amount of time with 2 little boys, Joy and Augie, who wanted to make sure I understood it well enough that I could ask good questions. And they really weren't going to let me leave till I asked a good question. So I was kind of challenged. And it was in the work that each and every one of these groups, and some of the kids did it alone, some kids did it in big groups, was absolutely amazing. So I would strongly encourage you, if you get an opportunity in future years to go to the 4th grade science fair, it shows you how the curriculum is building. It was amazing.
It's great, yeah, I was able to go to that last year, so it's a nice opportunity, right? All right. Then, the next item on the agenda is the principal's report, and we have Renee Tennant from Glacier for a special report.
Good evening, everyone. Well, I'm giving you an update because I think you remember a few months ago that we had a presentation from Dr. Bowles and Dr. Borden about the foreign language school in China, inviting us to host some students, which we did. And so these are the students that we hosted from Shijuan. Say it with me. Shijuan.
Let's see if
Foreign
you can
language
still
school.
say it the same way at the end of your talk.
Yes, it's a
I was
challenge.
trying to practice.
So I just wanted to tell you that it was a lovely time that we had with them. We had 5 7th grade girls from Shijuan, and it's near Beijing. These are some images of the school. This is a school of 10,000 students, K-12. We were also fortunate to talk to 2 of the teachers on Wednesday, the last day before they left. So a little bit more about this school. As I said, it's located near Beijing in the Hebei province, People's Republic of China. It was built in 1994. And the unique thing about this school is that they have sister school relationships in 11 countries, and that DeForest is a sister school. And we just got a taste of that too, in February. But that's, I think it's really a unique opportunity that these students have to, and their teachers to travel to other schools and experience what life is like. What did we do when they were here? It was a whirlwind tour, because they arrived on Saturday and they left on Thursday morning. So Sunday we had a plan that lasted almost the entire day. We went down to campus, which they really enjoyed, because these students are already thinking in 7th grade about where they're going to go to college. And so it was really a priority for them to go down to UW. It was probably one of the coldest days that we had. So we really did a walking tour. We started at Memorial Union, and we looked at the Red Gym, and we went up Bascom Mall, and then we ended up over at the UW bookstore, and they were in souvenir heaven there at UW bookstore. So much so that we were late for the Capitol tour. And that was also a whirlwind tour. They really didn't go on a guided tour, but looked around the Capitol. And then after that, we ended up at Ian's Pizza on State Street, which was a real treat. And I think they had a great time. And obviously some of the other things that they did was really the purpose was to experience life in America. So they shadowed the host students at school. They went shopping. They enjoyed after-school activities. I know that the first day was a half-day in-service day, and many of the students went sledding on the hill by Glacial Drumlin. And then and they just also did some of the things with that the families normally did in the evenings. And the last Tuesday night, we had a taco dinner at school. They invited some of their other friends. The whole students invited some of their friends and our guests, and they really loved that. And the next day, their teachers came to Glacial Drumlin, and they opted to come to Glacial Drumlin versus going to DeForest High School, so we felt really honored about that. And the teachers said that the students reported to them they didn't want to leave because they felt they had a lot of freedom at our school. And it was interesting to hear some of the comparisons from the teachers. They were really interested in reading. So we directed them and let them sit in on some reading classes. They also told us that their class sizes consist of about 40 students. And they really noticed that our instruction is much more interactive. And they said that, they're with 40 students in a classroom, they really are working on classroom management. So it was interesting. We exchanged information. They were very interested in assessment. I showed them the MAP assessment and what it gives us. And so I gave them the NWEA information that they could contact and get in touch with. And NWEA, they're very interested in that. So it was a great time and a very good learning experience for everyone involved. I just wanted to publicly thank our host families The students that hosted and their families, Megan Holberg, Kennedy Lawrence, Morgan Lochner, Samantha Milkey, and Andrea Wendricks. So that's that. And thank you also to Dean Bowles and Susan Borden. And we just want to thank you for expanding our worldview.
And plans for next year?
I'm assuming so. We
Yeah.
didn't, we didn't tighten anything up, but
But
The
even
door's
possibly
open.
more students if there were more hosts available, or? do
I don't think we'd have too many problems finding host families. They were very open to it and grateful for the opportunity to do
We
it.
really took 5 of
We only took five students.
DeForest students. That
Oh,
was,
okay.
Susan Borden says, why don't you take 5 the first time and see how it goes, and getting the students, and I think that was a good suggestion.
Right, yeah, okay.
But we are official, as
As a sister
official
school?
as my signature was in
Okay.
the agreement.
Oh, I didn't know
So
that.
maybe that's what I'm saying, so maybe we could get our own.
Oh, yeah,
tent
if you,
next year or whatever, or
I
five,
think
whatever.
I think another next step is to designate somebody. There's a lot of opportunities that we don't, I'm on the state council for international education, and there's a lot, Susan Borden is too, that's how I got connected with her. And there's a lot of opportunities there with connections to DPI and so forth that maybe get channeled through your office a bit, and curriculum instruction. And if we had somebody that could be at the end of that email more frequently, who could have a more direct interest besides the director's office, it might be good. And I think this school goes all the way from small kids all the way through high school, so there's chances. And when I was there were 42 representatives from 24 different countries, and of people like myself and others, principals, superintendents, and so forth. It's interesting that I've talked to Dan in the past, that the state superintendent has adopted and has been in the process for a couple of years now, and of an international certificate, which can be officially endorsed on the graduation diploma, and can be done on transcripts, which we've involved a lot of selective colleges in this process, and most of them are saying that this would be a piece of their evaluation for admission. In most of them, some colleges that are just simply using class rank or grade point average, or it might be valuable there, like at Whitewater. It's valuable to them when they have to make their decisions in the last 10% or something like that. But I would suggest that I'd suggest if you get it going and look at it and see if it's possible. I think there's now almost 60 high schools in the state that have adopted the program, and I have a little pride of authorship because I'm one of 3 co-authors on that policy proposal, and it's now picked up. In fact, we shared that in China with the people from Iowa, and they were here at the conference last weekend, getting their schools doing it here. We had 200 students and about 80 teachers and administrators down at this Union South. We occupied almost all the second floor in going through all these kinds of things. So I won't show my slides because you've done enough, and but I'll make my pitch on, and hoping to see that on the agenda sometime soon. But did a good job. It was
fun.
nice out at the airport too.
That's right.
I was out at the airport,
Showing the slides.
the plane kept coming in later and later. Andrew finally had to leave, but it was to see those Chinese students come down the stairs and and probably 60 people, and the kids holding up the Chinese name of the student as they came down the escalator at Dane County Airport. It was kind of fun.
I didn't check the flight schedules, and Andrew and I were there for the first arrival. It didn't happen, and then I wasn't able to come back.
Oh, okay.
So I missed it, because I
Yeah,
came.
that's right, I heard you
But
were
anyway,
there
yeah.
too. And,
That was, yeah, it sounds fun. All right, thank you. Then we will go on to board reports, and the first report is the Long-Range Facilities Planning Committee. Dean?
Yes, I'll try to make it brief. I think since the last time we've had, I think the most important thing is that we're meeting at each of the schools in the district. I think I reported last time that we did Nichols School down here, and we also met at Taylor Prairie. Connie did an excellent job of giving us a tour of the school. I think it's an extremely good and interested group of people. They were noticing things that, in terms of not only educational types of things, they're noticing crowding. They're noticing, and Connie would point out things that she would like to do differently, which we encourage to do because they want to look at redesign and so forth. And she did such a nice job of having a floor plan that the members of the committee said these ought to be prepared like this for the next visits, which are going to be, what's our next visit?
Cottage Grove Elementary.
Cottage Grove Elementary, right. And so at Cottage Grove there. And we've also created, well, for want of a better term, 3 working groups. One of them is board members only. One of the issues we have is dealing with the district-owned property. These are particularly the 2 houses over on Cold Spring and all of the lots that are along Damascus, and also the any other type of property that we have to get permission to use or we have restrictions on and that kind of thing. The property here at Nichols that's on Pheasant Hill is also on that list. So that they're going to determine what the commercial or sales value of that would be, and also in concert with the consultants, what good it might be if we kept that property and we used it in a different way. So the answer for Pheasant Hill might be very much different than the lots on Damascus. Two other that's John Cleansing is on that one, John Weinberger and Brandon Buell, and I think that those 3 are going to be excellent. They're kind of into it. One from Cottage Grove and another is a realtor. The other 2, I'll call them, for want of a better name, working committees. They're basically school district committees. We invited any board members that wanted to kind of join in to let us know if they want to sit in and on the discussions, and we probably need to remind them again that that's possible. My guess is they're going to let the school committees work. One group is going to look at athletic facilities, recreational facilities, and also in some areas we have some agreements or constraints with the municipality and so forth, and where we can use. So this will be obviously the big banana is the high school football field and so forth, but there's other issues as well. The other committee that Renee, I guess, can I say that she's chair?
Sure.
Of that group? Okay, I don't know if you name her or not, but anyway, she'll be an important person whether she's chair or not on it. And that is to look at the grade configurations, particularly in Cottage Grove. Should we have pre-K 2, 1, 3.5, should we have all pre-K-5 schools? And that has to do with their educational use and utility, baby size of school and the type of schools that are built, if that, you know, down the line. But it also has to do with concerns about building schools, one school, say, in a high rent district, and another in a mixed housing district, and to what extent those become socially distinct, if you like, if you went pre-K-5, or whether they're transferring around. There's busing costs and things like that. So they're going to be looking at those factors. That'll be not only social but cost and educational. That's about where we left it today.
Yeah, good. Any questions? Susan?
Dean, could you, the press release, which is like an incredible set of minutes from your meetings, could we post those on Board Docs? Or are you gonna have a separate page that has
They're
materials?
on the website,
They're on
aren't
the
they?
website. Oh, okay, okay.
Dan, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, I read them personally, so I don't look at them on the
I know, I
website,
was
but I
just
think
thinking
they are on
that
the website.
if people were looking in Board Docs for a report, I mean, it's right there. So,
Yeah.
you're right, if it's someplace else, we don't have to.
We have a dedicated web page entirely, so it gets updated after every meeting with,
Okay.
so.
I
there's a
just
link.
thought that was such a comprehensive, a nice, really comprehensive document. If somebody were coming to this meeting and looking for your report, there's not, they wouldn't see anything.
Oh, you want my report on Board Docs?
No,
Or-
the press release.
Oh, the press
Which
release.
is
Oh,
like the
they're up.
minutes.
Yeah, they are,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I was saying you didn't have to write
Right.
one, you could just
Right.
put that up, and then we'd always, every time we'd have something that if people were coming to the meeting and wanted to follow, they would always have that. Take a look.
Jessica, were you gonna say something?
You can print them out before the next meeting.
Right.
I just want to post it
Okay.
so other people can see them, because they're really good.
Then moving to the next, now, the next one is the Monona Grove Education Foundation, but I know Susan wasn't able to go to this, so
Yeah.
did you do anything to the report, or
Well, what,
do you?
you know, what actually, kind of what happened was, there was a report that was actually put in for
Oh.
the April 10th meeting.
This is from the last one, where you were here.
Yeah,
Right,
because
right.
I was there, but I left early and they
Right.
didn't report out all the grants. So that, I think we got posted, right?
Sends to all staff.
This is the same one. This already went to the staff. Okay. So I just wanted to hit you just really quickly. It does list all the 15, 16 teacher grants and kind of what they're doing, and they're really, really interesting. So I would strongly encourage you to look at that. And the last meeting was March 10th, and I was unable to attend, so Dan went, and I'm sure we'll have a written report for
Sure.
that we'll also post for the next meeting, because sometimes this is a little
Yeah,
tight.
yeah. So, it's okay, I'll just add just a couple quick comments
Sure,
about,
that'd be
because
great.
one of the grant recipients was a Sarah Bradley, first grade teacher at Taylor Prairie School. And so the foundation board member thought it'd be nice to actually visit the school and see exactly what her classroom looked like and so on. So we actually held our meeting at Taylor Prairie School Tuesday morning, and then visited, actually went on a tour of the entire school and also visited, her classroom. And so they thought it was such a good idea. I think they plan on the next few meetings holding them in all the various schools as well. So in addition to our facilities committee, visiting the schools, that the foundation board members are as well, and I think the more we can get people in the schools, certainly the better, so they can see firsthand the programs that we go, and we're always willing to kind of show off the things that we're doing, so there'll be, as I said, we'll have a more detailed report to come.
So the April meeting, which is always the second Tuesday.
It'll be another school, I don't recall the order that we chose, but it'll be
Okay.
at a school as well, yeah.
Okay, we'll announce that for you.
Then the next report, Personnel Committee, Jessica?
Just checking the date of our next meeting. The Personnel Committee met Monday, March 9th. Dan and Nicole presented the committee with some preliminary possible revisions to the handbook, in large part to kind of confront some redundancies in the handbook, which we had some discussion about, and they will be bringing that back to us at our next meeting. We also had a very short preliminary discussion about a possible administrative compensation plan. Kind of, just getting our ducks in a row, and that was the first read that we had that day too. Our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, April 13th at 6.
Is the information, is there information posted about the discussion or the administrative plan, or is that still just, did you have any documents that?
We do have a draft document for the administrator salary guidelines. Is that what you're
Yes.
referring to?
I believe we posted it on board docs and administrative content.
It
It's still a
wasn't-
draft, so we
It is.
didn't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It is on board docs.
It is.
so that-
Good, thank you, thank you very much.
You can
Thank
have
you,
that.
thank you.
Mhm.
I just, because people had asked about that, and so
Yeah.
I said, I'll
By all
ask about it at
means.
the meeting, because I haven't looked. You
By all
know, I'll
means.
be the first one to say that, so that'd be great. And then, would you guys just kind of be tuned in, if there are things that you, so one of the things that happened when we were doing the handbook is, and you know this, Dan, there's a lot of policy in there.
Mhm.
So if you get an overlap, or so instead of having it go to you, I mean, if whatever process you want to use is fine with us. Go to you, go to us, whatever.
Sure.
But if it really looks like policy and you want to send it over, then
Well, it's certainly, there's absolutely no intention at all to rewrite
no, I'm just
policy on our
saying, if
behalf.
there's something we
Yeah.
can help you with, or you want to,
Thank
you
you,
can
I
do the
appreciate that.
FMLA and we can do
Well,
it.
yeah, if there's policy, definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
certainly,
That-
thank
that
you.
wasn't the
But
case.
remember, there were just a few things that you had looked at and you said, so, that'd be great. I mean, not really, but if you need to do something. just let us
Question
know.
here, when you finish your work, do you expect to have a teacher handbook?
I don't think that I could say yes to that, no, not necessarily. I think that right now we're in a very, very preliminary initial conversation about possibly making some changes to the existing handbook right now.
I think it's important to have a teacher handbook. You may want to make reference. I'd rather have a teacher's handbook that makes reference to policy than policy that makes reference to the handbook. I think it would be a lot better to do that. Because if you want to have, for example, was given, I sat in for a while, example was given was FMLA, something like that. That applies to everyone. I think those things are in common. You can simply say FMLA, define it in a sentence, and then refer to the handbook.
Right.
But I think that in terms of those things which are unique to teachers' professional work, compensation, job security, those all things, I think that they ought not to get lost in a compendium
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree
of
with
that
you.
sort of thing. And because I think if you try to do both of these things at twice, a lot will be lost from many, many months of work of this board with our teachers and the kind of social contract, not a legal contract, but a social contract, and bonds of trust that we created at that time.
Sure.
And I hope that you do not use I hope the time of making these changes will not make substantive changes
No,
to that
no,
without
That's
them
certainly
being
not the
debated
plan.
individually and separately.
right. I absolutely hear what you're saying and agree with that. I think, the revisions that were presented to the committee certainly were not presented in the spirit of deleting things or hiding anything. Some of the changes that we have looked at, are just fixing redundancies or things that are incorrect. Any large changes in policy will need to be looked at very, very carefully. Certainly will be.
Well, I noticed, for example, at least I may have misread it, Dan, you could correct me, but references to evaluations of teachers. We have in the handbook that clearly define that teachers should be referred to the professional development manual, which has Danielson enclosed into it. And I don't, it was hard for me to understand from the draft that you had, because it was hard to go from that to this other, because I didn't know quite which ones were being deleted and so forth. I wasn't sure if that was happening or not, but I'm very concerned about the issues that there may be need, if there may be need for some changes, but I would be very concerned that those be clearly identified and we work with our teachers
Yeah,
on making any of those changes.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah, and my.
And thank you for that comment. I mean, that's, I hope that that impression, that you have not gotten a contrary impression, I definitely, I hear what you're saying, I agree with you.
And I thought that the idea was that there would still be a handbook, but the idea was it would be shorter, and some of the stuff that, like the policies that are now in it, would be linked instead electronically, so that, because your first question was, will there be a handbook?
No,
thought
what
that was
the
kinda
question
my
that I was answering was, of course there's gonna be a
Okay.
handbook. Are we redoing the handbook right now? No. I thought that's what you were asking
Right.
me. No, absolutely not. I can't say yes, we're going
Not-
to have a different
Not
handbook.
substantively?
You know what, we had a very initial conversation, there were issues that were raised, and we're gonna move from there. I can't, second guess the process before it's even gone, played out.
I just see
Teachers-
lines through
Yep, Yep.
text that was in the handbook, that are in the proposals, that in my judgments are not only substantive, but very substantive.
And some of those were put back in after, we didn't agree to those, so
Okay.
that's the part of the process that we
Well,
have to work through, we're not
I really
finished,
want to
so.
caution people from
Right.
saying things like, those were put back in, because
Well,
nothing was
not-
taken
not
out.
put back in, nothing was
Nothing
taken
has
out.
been taken out, there have
Thank you,
been
you're
no
correct.
changes made,
Right, that's correct.
period.
Yeah, I think that we do need to be careful between separating out those that are substantive changes.
Yeah.
Some of the things can be taken out of there without becoming substantive changes because that information is elsewhere, or individual contracts, for example, and so on. We do need to be very careful about breaking those things that do become
Correct.
substantive changes, breaking those out and bringing those to board because it's really policy at that point.
Right.
And not necessarily going to the policy committee, but it is board policy, and we need to have a separate discussion on those. And that's different from the bookkeeping
Right.
of what gets printed.
And rest assured,
we just have to
Dean-
be careful we don't conflate those.
Rest assured, that's on our wavelength right now.
Well, and I don't know if this is reassuring, but I think that's an astute statement, and that is that a lot of that in the handbook is, whether it's actual policy, and we have in the policy section, it is policy. And as soon as it's kind of deemed that way, then it's regulated by policy. And there's some very clear processes your committee has to follow
Mhm.
as you review that. So no matter who's doing it, because we went without a policy committee for a while, we still had to follow processes.
What they're dealing with is basically personnel policy, right? I mean,
Guidelines,
yeah, well, it's not guidelines, it's what we go by.
Right. It has a different, I can't claim I totally understand this, but it does have a different legal standing than straight board policy. Don't ask me to explain it, but that's what I've been told by lawyers. But anyway, it is essentially policy, it is how we do things.
We adopted it.
Correct. So that's, I thought the process was fine, and it was, there was thorough discussion, and, yeah.
And there will continue
And
to
there will
be.
continue to be, and teachers will be,
Yes.
it'll be explained to them as well. So, yeah, that's good. Susan?
Are you guys keeping minutes, and are we posting those?
I
think as a
don't know
committee-
if we
There are notes
posted
taken.
I
it.
was gonna say, as a committee,
We don't
I could
always
be
post
wrong, I
minutes.
think you're required,
Not
as a board committee, I could be
Well, there could be basic minutes posted, yeah, but we won't, not detailed discussion
No.
is gonna
Yeah.
start this. So I mean, basically, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the plan is that once any of this occurs, there will be discussion with the teachers, it will come to the board. This committee is not gonna hold,
Oh my gosh, no.
I mean, do anything different. Some of the things were, for example, there were some salaries listed and they included a minimum wage that's too low, so clearly that had to come out. I mean, there were a lot of it was cleanup of stuff like that that's no longer even accurate.
Yeah, there was,
The educator effectiveness had to be put in, because that's now
And
established
model
as opposed to the old
yeah.
system, so that was part of what you were looking at with the
It was-
evaluation. So it was a lot of that kind of stuff, really,
Yeah.
more than, and there's quite a bit of that, actually. It's interesting to find out.
And that's all posted, right? So people can see that if they want to see it.
is that,
It-
well,
no,
No, it
it's
is not at
draft.
this point, it's still a work in progress, and
No.
it will be when it's
So
ready.
if you.
Could we,
well-
I think, could we have this discussion later? I don't think we have.
Okay,
yeah.
but the reason I'm asking is because one of the things we've worked on is to have that be collaborative, and so I'm just trying to find out what your process is, so that if people ask, we can tell them where to look for the information.
I can answer that question really easily in that we were presented with some draft revisions, first read. I don't think it's appropriate to put out draft first
reads, right.
first reads to anyone. I think that that's a very dangerous practice to get into.
So you didn't see them before the meeting?
No,
Correct.
correct. So if other board members want to have access to that, yes, but should that be put out into the general populace? No, because we haven't even talked about it, much less made a decision. So I feel very nervous putting draft documents out and get people really stirred up and concerned about things that likely won't even be changed.
That's exactly
So-
right.
Yeah.
Similar discussion. We don't agree. I mean, I think if you're gonna talk about it publicly.
And this is
put
the
it out there.
discussion that I did, that is not
That's fine, we
agendized, and I
won't-
don't want to get into that right
We
now.
won't have that.
Okay.
Actually, it is part of the policy report. We can ask those questions.
Not exactly.
I don't wanna take the time,
Not
I agree.
exactly. Okay, if we're finished, we'll move on to the policy committee then and have the policy report. Susan?
Actually, I already gave the policy report at the last meeting. I think we had that posted and we haven't met. So we're gonna meet on the 16th. But we are gonna have the first read on, yep. I gave that on the 20, was that the 20?
Oh, so we already have the first reading?
No.
Mm.
Oh,
Yeah, that's what I said to the, remember, policy report, because we haven't had the meeting.
Sorry, yeah.
So,
It was a report on the meeting, but not a
Susan,
first read of the
Who
policy.
does your minutes?
okay. Well, that's why I'm confused.
Joyce,
This is the meeting I wasn't present at, so I can't, yeah. So what do we need to do tonight on this?
so tonight we're gonna have first read on.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I was asking, okay.
Yeah.
All right, good, let's go.
That's exactly
Okay.
right. I was just saying that, that's what I'm for. And so I'm turning it over to Dan.
Okay. All right, purchasing policy 672 is something that the committee's been working on, not continuously, but over a year. And the reason for it is that the current policy is very, in some parts, ambiguous and difficult to read. In fact, there have been different interpretations about what the policy really means. And so we had some initial discussions, again, a year ago. We didn't really have we didn't come up with good language we were satisfied with at the time. And so what the committee has done now, the last few months, is looked at our current policy. They have looked at the Neola templates, combined those together, and come up with a recommended policy that we think maintains the spirit of what the practice has been in this district, but hopefully clarifies the language much more clearly about what sorts of things, what is the process for purchasing, what sorts of things require board approval, and so on. And so that's what we have tonight is the result of that work.
Well, I actually would add, we actually made some substantive changes.
Mhm.
And we talked about, kind of you and Jared talking about that. There were basically three things that we talked about, and this wasn't Neola. Here's what I want to emphasize. When we're in this process, we take the old board policy and look at it line by line. We take the Neola template and look at that line by line. And then we take the revised Neola template that Dan and Steve, the consultant, have worked on, and we look at all three. And then we look at exactly what the differences are and whether or not we approve the differences. So, the differences effectively were, In the previous policy, was it $15,000 or less required 3 quotes?
Right, so there's 2 pieces, right, there's the
Okay.
purchasing and there's the quotes and bidding. And the old policy had, dollar amounts, but it also was a little bit unclear as to exactly when you need to require the quotes. Basically what exceptions applied was the thing that was a little bit unclear as to whether there be contracts and so on. And so we tried to clarify what those exceptions are, rewrote that with, again, kind of the same spirit, but hopefully much more clearly. And yes, the dollar amounts were changed as well. And so to separate purchasing from bidding from quotations. And so in that respect, I would say the new policy is quite, different than the old one as far as trying to clarify that.
What is the difference between a bid, a quote? I understand a
Yeah.
bid usually has some specifications
Yeah.
that go out, and you get it back formally,
Yep.
and you open them up, and surprise, you see them. Is that what you mean by bid?
Yeah, that'd be the bid, correct.
And then there are, then there's something about simply getting quotes.
Mhm.
That means you call up on the telephone and say, how much you're gonna charge to give us consultation services for a day,
Yeah.
right?
So the policy requires quotations on purchases more than $5,000, which of course is good practice.
Okay,
And how those quotes, right, depending on what the service is, sometimes it might be the phone call, sometimes it might be, in writing, sometimes, there's a number of different ways of doing that. But it does mandate that we have quotes for those purchases, which we do every day, particularly like in the maintenance department. When we're going out and doing bulk purchasing. It's common to always get several quotes. We didn't identify the number of quotes because it varies. In some cases, there might only really be 2 vendors that provide a certain service, and that's all you can get. In most cases, 3 is kind of the standard, to have a minimum.
Yeah, so one of the clear changes was, we went from requiring before, between 3,000 and 5,000, you had to have 3 written quotations. So 1 to 2, apparently then 1 to 3. So previously, 3 to 15, we had to have 3 written quotations. Now, over 5,000, we just need a price quotation. So it's not even an S, I don't think.
It is an S.
It is an S? So that would mean more than 1?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
okay, if it's over 5,000, what happens?
You have to have a quotation.
More than 1.
And then, when do any of these come to the board?
At 15,000. See, that's what we talked about having.
25,000.
But only if they're not
Policy's
budgeted.
right here.
But
You're
only
right.
if they're
It was,
not
I'm
budgeted.
sorry, the change was from 15 to 25.
Correct.
Yeah,
Sorry.
but only if they're not budgeting, which is never.
Yes.
What about in the case of repeat
No.
services?
That is true.
Susan,
Yes.
what about in the case of, let's say you had a consultation service for $10,000. You could have another one for $10,000 and a third one for $10,000.
That's right.
Does that constitute a $30,000 contract
No,
or
that-
3 $10,000 ones?
No,
So that would never come to the board in that case.
that would be correct.
Mhm.
And it would have, that wouldn't have required board approval before, so that's not changed. But
Yeah.
it would have required 3 quotes.
Mhm.
But it still would have been at the discretion of the Director of Business Services and the superintendent. It wasn't until, wasn't it 15,000 that, I don't know.
It would
my
seem
grid.
to
I
me-
haven't read on this, it
Well,
was.
it would seem to me,
Was that right
Yeah.
here?
it would seem to me that, I don't think the board should micromanage, but I think that there is a situation.
Yeah, that's what I did too. That's the new one. They want the old one too.
Yeah, Susan, I think there are situations where there are quotes on repetitive services, and often from competitive services from the same vendor, or products that you buy repetitively over, say, within a calendar year or something, or a fiscal year, that sort of thing, that can amount to overall exceeding the amount. And I think there needs to be some prior notice or some oversight or approval or something like that. You know, it's,
Do you want to address that?
I realize
I guess
that-
if you're getting an example, but I'm not really sure what that would be. I'm not following you at all on that.
Oh,
It has to do with the $10,000 consultant fees. What you're saying is, rather than just have you be able to do that, in those types of situations, and remember there's that section with the exceptions under it?
Mhm.
So we could clearly, we could at least explore language that would, if it were a particular type of service, it would come to the board.
but it could be goods as well.
We did talk about that in the committee and with Jeff as well, and the three of us,
He
we were
picked
trying to
his
pick, because he
numbers.
asked about that, and we had talked about it, and we were trying to come up with language, and then in the end, we decided we didn't see a reason to do it, and we dropped it.
Right.
Right.
And actually, it's
So you're
just.
dropping my suggestion tonight because you dropped it?
Well, no, I'm just
No,
saying
no,
that's, we
no,
didn't come up
listening.
with language, so if other people are in agreement that we should come up with language, we could try
Well,
it. We just
now
did-
that I
at
have
the
your
committee, we
draft here,
didn't.
if I came up with some language, because I just think that that's an area of accountability that ought to be there.
So your thought is, so we did look at some other drafts. So board approval is required at 25,000. Currently, that's 15.
For some things, yes,
For some.
but there are no exceptions.
Again, if what the board wants us to do as a group is to take it back and reevaluate that number, that's what you tell
Well,
us to do.
he's asking a different question. I
Well-
see, what you're asking for language to cover repeated payments to the same vendor that could,
Right,
Come over
the
whether it's goods or
Separate
services.
right.
It seems to me that, at least in other school districts, other types of things, some abuse of the purchasing process has come out of that kind of activity to where there is no accountability
Exactly.
on repeated purchases
Right, yeah, I know, I see what you're
of
saying.
the same type of goods or
Sure.
service or vendor.
So if you just use-
Appropriate language you find other places is purchase and contract shall not be structured or divided for the purpose of circumventing the requirements for authorization or quotation of patent.
Okay, where'd you get that?
I looked it up online.
Okay, can you send me,
Yeah, sure.
send it to
Yeah,
Susan?
would you send that to us?
Yeah,
If you would send us that language, we would
because
take
that's,
that back to
that's the
committee.
kind of language
That'd
we
be
were
great.
looking for, so since you found it,
Yes.
send it.
I appreciate the work of my aide
That's
here.
right.
Yeah, but that's exactly what that's why we're doing the first
You've done your
reading,
homework,
guys.
I haven't. I'll let you
That's
go.
exactly what we want.
Peter, go ahead.
Exactly.
To be honest, I have some real severe difficulties with this policy as is written, because I think it is actually more confusing and ambiguous than our prior policy.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Part of that problem it comes from the fact that there are sort of three things it's trying to address. One is who has authority to make what purchases. One is what are requirements, so once you decide who has authority, then what are requirements for quotations or bids? And the third is what is the competitive bid process? All three of those things are mashed into one, and in fact, if you read this, it goes back and forth essentially between those. And it makes it confusing, it makes it hard to read,
Okay.
and hard to pick up on those, what the differences are. Then there's some specific things, and I'll start at the beginning. It is the policy of the Board of Education that the superintendent seek price quotations. Quotations with a plural, but none is specified. So how many? And then what is the definition of a price quotation? Do you mean a specific written quotation, or do you mean you can get a verbal quotation? Do you mean you can get look it up on a website, just get a price list? All of those may or may not be acceptable, but that needs to be defined what it is. On purchase of more than $5,000, does this mean the policy should be that we seek multiple quotations on every purchase, but there be a requirement above $5,000 that we do it? Because it's good practice on every purchase to seek multiple quotations. That should be our policy. You don't want to bother with small numbers. You don't want to make people bother too much about it, so you don't have a firm policy. For more than $5,000, then I think we should have 3. That's the standard practice, and we should say that. Now, there's cases where you don't have 3 vendors, like Apple computers. Thank you very much. And that's okay. You put in a section in the policy that says, except when there's not 3
That's
vendors or 3 acceptable vendors. But I think that it should be 5,000 firm 3 exception is specified. less than 5,000, policy should be to have multiple price quotations. The fact that you don't have to have a quotation at all, I mean, means that in essence, you don't know what the price is at all before you're making the purchase. You know, when you get a price out of a catalog or off, you know, a website or whatever, off Amazon or eBay or whatever, that's actually a quotation, and that counts. And it is normal practice, you never buy anything without a quotation. You never ever buy anything without a quotation. And it should be the policy that you seek multiple of those. You know, where I work, I purchase things all the time, and I'm always looking for multiple quotations. When it hits $5,000, I have to have 3, or I have to explain why not. I have to have, you know, here are the 3, and I have to explain why they're not. Those 3 can be, I can just look them up.
So, Peter, wait, I want to make sure that we get all these notes, because these are really good suggestions.
Okay.
Okay, so is that piece that you just gave us, we should be defining a quotation?
We should, the language.
And by doing that, then it'll.
The language should be that it's the policy to seek multiple quotations for any purchase. Above 5,000, 3 are required, except in cases when there aren't multiple vendors, or 3 vendors available. Except without reasonable justification. It doesn't even just say without 3 vendors. It should just say without. You have to have a reasonable justification why you don't have 3. And then we need to find price quotation. But I think by price quotation and above 5,000 should be a written quotation. $5,000 for a single item. That creates a huge ambiguity, because what if it's $6,000 for 2 copiers? Is that covered by this, or is it not covered by this? What's the question? The answer should be, it should be $5,000 for a contract, for the purchase, whatever that we're agreeing to, that you're signing on the dotted line, more than $5,000, not for a single item, because that creates a huge ambiguity.
And that was the intent, so we'll add language that clarifies that.
It could be, okay, so is it $100,000 for 20 items? You're saying that's not covered? You know, here, they fall out of there. Except in cases of emergency. Emergency is not defined, or when the materials purchased are of such a nature that the price negotiations would not result in savings, and that price negotiations would not result in savings to the district. If price negotiations would result in savings to the district, why are we talking about quotations? Because quotations aren't price negotiations. So this sentence has conflated negotiations and quotations. That's the first sentence. Okay?
I know. Okay.
That's the first sentence. And I think there's other policies, and I could go on for a while, but there's several ambiguities, I think, in the first sentence. The other thing is I think that there's some important policy changes in here. One of the big ambiguities I have is the superintendent is authorized to purchase all items within budget allocations. We did strategic planning. Is there a line item in the budget that's presented to the public that says outside contracting for strategic planning?
Not specific to strategic.
So the question is that in the budget or not in the budget? There's an enormous ambiguity there. Our budget doesn't have this kind of detail. And I don't think we want to get into that kind of detail. And my biggest concern is that leaves the superintendent open to accusations of, you know, abusing his authority, and the board can wash its hands of it. The board can say, well, you know, and it could come as, well, that's not in the budget, and the superintendent could have the impression that it's in the budget, but the board can say, oh, that wasn't in the budget because it didn't say the specific line item. And I think that's too vague, and it doesn't give us a good feeling about the board superintendent relationship, and I think it'd make it too problematic, if you ask me. We don't investigate our budget to the level that we need. We don't look at it to the level that we need for it to be also the purchasing documents, if you ask me. There's a reason that budgeting and purchasing are normally done with separate processes. The budget is to make sure you have enough money for everything. The purchasing is to make sure that that money is well spent. Just because you budget $100,000 for something, you get $50,000. The purchasing process is to make sure that you get it at the best possible price, or get what you want at the best possible price. And so conflating the budgeting process with the purchasing process is, if you ask me, just bad policy.
And would you have
And what I would do instead is I would give a list of specific things that the superintendent is authorized to spend on.
That's what I was going to ask.
And for example, he can hiring, salaries for hired personnel, that's right off the list. That's something he hasn't come to us for authorization to do that, right away. So I think you could do things that way. I could go on with this policy. I think that there are some significant issues that need to be addressed. I would like to say, I actually wrote up,
Peter, that would be
I tried to,
wonderful.
if you want to pass that down, I tried to sort of straighten some of this out.
Can you send us the electronic?
I will send it.
That would be super.
Send it out.
That'd be super.
What I would like to see, by the way, is that this come back, go to the Personnel Committee, revise these, that does not come back with
Personnel or
policy, I'm sorry. Send it to the Long Range Facilities Planning Committee. And I would, and not let it come back, and not see it come back till April, and the reason I say April is that I believe that this goes at the fundamental relationship, board's responsibility, and we should be a 7-member board before we adopt this policy.
Okay. Let me just, here's one of the, so, just so everybody understands, until we make revisions, we're still operating under the old policy.
That's true.
And the old policy, if you want to do your fully
It's a
vetted
problem.
version of that,
It's a
it has
major
the
problem.
very similar problems, if not worse. And it actually is hamstringing, seriously, our Director of Business Services. So that's one reason we were trying to get some revisions to you at this time, so we could get this kind of input, which we really appreciate.
Is there something pressing that's policy?
How are you hamstrung?
Well, in terms of,
Let's not let Jared talk. Since the question was for him, I think.
go for it.
You want-
I think it's more of the question of the gray area and being able just to move forward as we start planning for next year's budget. Having a clear policy, so as our individuals start planning for next year, they know which policy, and then we can get systems in place before teachers leave for the summer, so we can follow the policy, whichever it's going to be.
Okay.
The thing I underlined was the same thing that Peter had. All items within budget allocations. And in my judgment, for me to approve a budget with that line in it, you could have one budget allocation, couldn't you? Or at least do it by the category 10 and 20 and blah, 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 blah. And it seems to me that we've approved the whole budget, so the superintendent can spend anything, as long as he doesn't spend something out of so it would seem to me that this would have to get down to awfully great detail. And we have, at least at this point, I would see us spending 2 or 3 our meetings here approving a budget to get to the kind of detail that this purchasing policy. So I think the separation that Peter is talking about needs to be dealt with, and this line, in my judgment, makes the budgeting process much longer. We tend to go through your process and say, is it balanced? The categories look right, and we say, okay, and then we're looking for accountability, largely through the purchasing and expenditure as we go through. Isn't that fair?
It is fair.
And I'm talking to him because
No, it's good.
we're putting this on the back of, because we'd have to have a much bigger, we're going to have a joint finance committee to approve line items in budgets that that allocate these large amounts into a lot of smaller amounts.
Unless you want to hire a Director of Business Services and then you let him do his job. But again, that's the
No,
balance.
no, that's not what I said.
No, it's the balance
Not what I
though.
said.
And so, the other thing I want you to understand is that between the current policy and the changed one, that language didn't change. So, basically what you're giving us is good advice. There isn't dramatic change there. So, on the piece that Dean was just talking about. So, again, this has come forward basically from the changes from administration. The board has concerns about the language and the way it's written, and we have some really good recommendations for going back and looking at this again. And there is at least one member of policy who is very committed to making sure that if we make these changes, that the board supports them. We are going to have strong representation and input from our Director of Business Services. And these are processes within the budget. So if you're not comfortable with how it reads, we'll make sure you are.
Well, I think part of the, but I never thought of it until Peter spoke up. I just think the distinction between purchasing and budgeting get commingled here unnecessarily and unfortunately.
It's that
And
language.
it creates either a problem at the purchasing end, or it creates a problem at the budgeting end if there's going to be any, accountability at all. I just think, then I think every purchase on a voucher after it's been spent could be questioned, and I don't want to do that either. You follow what I mean?
Right.
Because we,
Is this-
or you
is this
should have
budget?
told
It's
us
not
about,
budget.
or you should have told us about that before you expended it. And I don't think that's a good thing, except in cases where we say, and these expenditures or in these bids or quotes, they ought to be. And I think the way we've done it has worked, and it hasn't slowed us down, and I think we have reasonable accountability through that. That's what I've learned.
Well, and I think actually we may have a recommendation for the way that we may have to do that. Specifically on this, we may need a board workshop to work on this, because if it's gonna take this amount of
Well,
time.
Let's,
Yeah, we'll look at this.
I think Peter's got some good stuff here, and I think we could meet again and bring it, I don't know that we need a whole workshop on this policy. but I-
Workshop.
Okay, let me just explain to you that
But I
the
think we
current
can come
board
there.
policy 672 says, it talks about this and goes into greater depth. It says it shall be the goal of the board and administration to secure the materials, equipment, and services for the district at the best prices, and that's what and then we're saying, and when do you need board approval for that? That can be obtained working within approved budget allotments. So again, I'm saying, that type of language was there before, we just followed it, and what you're asking for is greater definition of that piece. We'll talk about that.
I have to disagree with your interpretation, because it says the goal of the board administration. It doesn't say, it actually doesn't mention, it doesn't sort of give that authority to the superintendent. It says it's just that the goal is to obtain, working within the approved budget allotments. It just means that we're not going to exceed the allotments, but it doesn't extend that authority to make the purchase just because it's within the allotments.
I think you've given us some good things to think about and work on, and we should
Yep.
take this back to the committee before, and not continue to rehash it here, and then we can get your
I agree,
input
and
too.
if we need.
That'd be a more
that kind-
efficient way to do it, I
If we
think.
need that kind of time, then we will, we'll schedule a specific workshop for that.
I just get concerned when we get with policy and and we have papers that are defining relationships in personnel, or we're defining them in our teacher compensation, that the language on key concepts be generally understood or defined and consistently used.
Sure.
And I think that is lacking on what I saw in some of the proposed definitions there, and also in the teacher compensation, which I addressed at that meeting too.
Right.
And I think I'm finding it in a lot of, Mike, this is my expressed concern about some of the Neola stuff. I think we're coming out of, a professional background is awfully loose language without definition.
Well, let me just say this about the WSB policy resource guide does not even have a sample policy for us to work with. Many districts have a purchasing policy that's one paragraph. That they do, the board does monitor through the budget process as opposed to the purchasing, and into much greater detail. And I appreciate the point, you do it one way or the other. It is a little bit unique to be more restrictive on the purchasing as opposed to the budget. But I'm not suggesting we change the practice, but that would be something that, there really should be, thoughtfulness about that piece of it. So, well, we're total agreement about how we should purchase and get quotes and bids. That's going to happen regardless of what you have in the policy. It's your comfort level as a board as to what you want to have in the policy to ensure it happens. I'm going to guarantee that as long as this person's our business services, director, we're going to have good practices with quotes and
But good organizations define their policy not in terms of We want to get rid of all policy and business practices because we got a great
Not at
guy?
all.
No,
I'd say
Okay.
that's your comfort level as a board as to how much
Okay.
detail you want to have in this
But
policy.
we ought not to couch our concerns about, or my concern,
Yeah.
at least about budgeting and sales, to say that that is a or imply that's a criticism that we don't have
Oh,
a good
absolutely
business
not.
manager.
Correct.
And I just think that he would feel more comfortable knowing he has good practice, that he would recognize them when they're being offered by a board member,
Sure.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
Makes
And
sense.
again, I just
All right,
want to
so-
clarify, we will be writing a policy, not a procedure.
Right,
Yes,
right.
yeah.
All right.
Which-
So we're ready to,
And if I may on that point, I mean, if you want, as an administrative document, to have those policies, the procedures separated out, that's also fine, and I've just to Jared to generate what those appropriate
That's the administrative rule.
administrative rules.
yes, that might be a good idea, because next one. We're going to take a short break before we go into the next item, because that'll be
What are we
a little bit
doing?
longer. We're going to the teacher compensation plan, which
Oh,
will be,
you need to have a rest before.
so
we-
we'd have to have a rest. So
Oh,
we
yes.
Get geared up. You probably need one too.
What's that?
Year. And Dean has given regular updates during his board report. The last time that the board saw kind of a draft of the overall work, it's been quite some time. You've seen bits and pieces through the reports and so on. And so I think we are ready tonight to give a report of where we're at. And I'll just kind of real briefly talk about the timeline and the work that we've done and where we need to go. And then we've got a lot of people in the room that have been a collective effort. Our 3 board members who are on the committee. We've got our entire cabinet here that have been participating. So that's why we've got everyone here collectively to be able to not only present but to answer questions as we move forward with this process. So as I mentioned, we've been working on it quite some time. We're ready to present tonight where we're at this point. We'll get feedback from the board tonight, key questions and things that need to be answered. The next steps will be to then go out and have teacher meetings, very similar to what we did with the retirement plan, where we'll meet in all 5 schools and present, here's where we're at this point, get feedback from teachers, bring it back to the committee. If things go really well, the committee will be able to wrap up their work in April and come back to the board again. When we are ready for a final recommendation, again, there'll be at least 2 more board meetings, a committee of the whole where there's discussion before you're asked to vote on it. If it takes a little bit longer, it could be May, but the goal at this point, I think, is still April. We think we're pretty close, and hopefully we can put together the final pieces. So before we actually present it, committee members or Chairman Bowles, any other things to add to that?
Could I just ask, so in terms of the process, you said you're going to take it out in listening sessions? Is that
Correct,
what
exactly,
that is?
yes.
And are you going to do that similar to the way we did the retirement plan?
Exactly.
Each school
Yep.
and at a time when they can come and so
Yep.
5 buildings? Okay.
Exact same process, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Plus the fact that we've always had at least 5 teacher or staff representatives of varying sorts there at virtually every meeting. The only difficulty on that is sometimes they've changed. And
They've been pretty stable, though.
there's a stability of around 4 or 5
Right.
of them. Every once in a while, they bring in someone else
Right.
and you have to re-explain everything, or unfortunately, they often have a new good idea that we have to deal with or something. But by and large, I think the process has been longer and a little more chaotic than I would like, but I think we've had opportunities for feedback, input, and unfortunately, a couple of lectures from me at time to time on the need for evidence and standards and so forth. And the only thing I would say is that one of the things that before they kick off is that we are not getting rid of credits and degrees that we pay for after the fact We are basically going to approve credits and degrees before the fact so we can determine relevance and what standard of the delivery, because the market is really ranges from the best and elite to pure crap, if I could use that word. And it's and I think we've also, another key component that we've tried to consistently build in has been the whole idea of having the educator effectiveness and the standards for teacher licensing. In fact, it's the DPI master teacher license that provides a lot of the standard for evidence and things like that that would go in here. And I think there's general consensus on the committee that we're right there. People don't like my use of the word portfolio, including your board president, because I think she had a bad experience with it.
No, I have the old school vision of it that I
There's
can't get out of my head.
something in her early life that she's not gotten rid of. But I think we're looking at evidence,
Right, body of evidence.
particularly to move into. But it's the master teacher license evidence, largely the same thing we would ask for when you apply for that and so forth. So I think what we had to first cut at some language that would define these terms, and we're having a hard time, I think, with getting language that has a hierarchic set of standards from high to low or low to high. And we're getting words like exemplary and satisfactory and that kind of stuff, I think is hard to get at, but I think we have to get at that before we're final. But I think we're almost at the point where we can get down to the editing and fine tuning and that sort of thing, because I think there's general agreement and consensus on the structure, where we want to go. And I think at least Dan and Jared are telling us that the money that we've put in there, at least we're manageable in the short term, as long as the legislature stops meeting.
That's right.
Right. Okay. So that's my portion.
Okay.
Kick it off.
Yeah, so the documents that you have on board docs, you're going to present a PowerPoint that summarizes it. In the administrative content, you see the Word document. The reason it's there is it's a draft. That's the draft that was presented to the committee last Thursday. A number of edits were made at that committee meeting. We haven't had a chance to clean up that document yet, so as soon as we have that, we'll get that to the board immediately as well. So some of the things we made at the committee meeting, others were suggestions that things we still need to do yet. And so over this next month, we'll be cleaning that document up. So the next time that we come back to the board, we absolutely will have that as a public document that we're ready to openly discuss before there's any kind of approval. So.
Okay, so to begin it, we have a general career ladder framework that we developed that really forms what our teacher compensation plan is going to look like. The one on the screen is an abbreviated version. The one in the packet that was online is the full version of what this career ladder framework looks like. The basic thought here is that we have 5 levels, and a new teacher who had just come right out of school that we hire will be placed in level 1, and through their career here they would work their way up. And they may work their way up to level 5, they may only work their way up to level 3, and that is perfectly fine if they would like to be in level 3 throughout their career. But next I will just go through a little bit about each of these levels. So level 1 is the mentorship level. This level would be where we would place an individual who came right out of college or who had 1 year of teaching experience. They would have an initial educator license, and what we expect from them is that they're going to be a participant in our new teacher mentor program, and that they would have satisfactory performance evaluations. And what we mean by that is that we would recommend them for renewal in our district, that they're meeting standards. So This would be a level at which they would spend 2 years if they had no previous experience.
How does the, just for edification of the group, how does satisfactory performance evaluations relate to the educator effectiveness, 4, 3s, 2s, and 1s?
Sure. We came up with a working definition of satisfactory performance to mean a recommendation for continued employment without an improvement plan. And so realistically, what that would look like in the Danielson framework would be a preponderance of 3s, which would be proficient, perhaps a 2 here or there in an area where there would be growth for a new teacher. It's not uncommon to have, especially for a new service teacher, to have a point or 2 where there might be a 2 or a developing ranking in
So on a scale of 4, we would be seeing them advancing to the next level if they had 2 3s and 2 2s?
Well, I think
3
it's
2s,
I think it's a little more
3 3s, or 1
complicated
2?
than that. I think
What?
it's a little bit more complicated than that because we'd want to look at it at the component level of the evaluation and really look at the more fine-grained pieces of it. But I think it's fair to say if you saw a teacher with mostly 3s and a 2 here or there, particularly someone who's new to the profession, then that would probably be pretty typical.
How many 2s or 3s can you have?
I think I don't
It's
know
all,
that you can
it's
pin
all,
it
it's
down
only
like
4.
that.
There are only 4.
There are 4 domains.
Well, you can't have
Right.
some 3s and then 2s here and there. That sounds like several more.
And I'm talking about, that's at the domain level, the highest level of the organization of
Okay.
the framework. I'm referring to the
Oh,
level
you're
beneath
talking
that.
about the subdomain.
The subdomains, yeah, that's what I was
So-
talking about.
So, just so you know, I don't have a clue what you're talking about, because I don't have that background. So until you can present that, as we get into the depth of the questions with the chair, I don't know if anybody else is there, but you don't have, so, I think the question about satisfactory performance evaluation is excellent, and I would strongly recommend on page 3 of the draft that you add that as a definition, so people know what that means. Is that possible?
Yeah, I think they have it in the
Well, I'm
larger
looking
draft.
at your draft, Dean, that's all I have, and I didn't get it until late yesterday afternoon, I've been in meetings, and I didn't see the PowerPoint until today. So I'm only operating with what I can get done and be prepared for today.
I'm not responsible for board packets.
Well, your chair,
There is,
somebody has to post it.
well, and I don't know if this is the educator effectiveness
I should have
handbook
gotten
that we
it.
all have. I don't know whether that's accessible to us online now either, because a lot of this stuff got put in teacher resources and we can't access any of it. So I don't remember if that's accessible or not.
On page 7, it says,
Oh, okay. So
and we need to move it also, we talked about that at committee level, we
it
have
needs
to have
be moved up.
consistent everywhere.
That is, yeah, you're right. I see.
So,
Hey, we had to have what?
that, where we had, some places we had things, we said, make sure we put it in every level, so it was consistent.
Yeah.
And so that will happen, we talked about it in the committee, but the definition's on page 7.
Right, yes,
It
yeah.
needs to occur at every level.
But when you start talking about all those domains, I guess Susan's right,
Yeah.
without having something in front of us.
Never had nothing to do with the
You'll know what
compensation
that
plan.
means.
The only thing you need to know about the compensation
Right.
plan is that teachers have to have satisfactory performance in order to move on.
Right.
And that definition is on page 7, and we can actually add it to page 3.
It will be added in several places, so you can find it, yes.
Okay, so if a teacher has been with us for 2 years and they're recommended for continued employment, then they would move to level 2, which is post-mentorship. This level is a level that a teacher would remain at for 3 years. In this category, they need to have an initial educator license. They would have 2 to 4 years of teaching experience. If they had just completed level 1, then they come in with 2 and they're here for 3 years. However, let's say we're hiring somebody new and they have 3 years of prior experience. I believe they'd be placed here in level 2. What we expect of them is that they're going to complete our new teacher mentor program. They are going to complete a PDP and obtain their professional educator license. And they also need to have satisfactory performance evaluations so that we recommend them for continued employment in our district.
Just to add a question, how does a teacher advance from level 1 to level 2? I know the answers, I'm just trying to.
Sure. The administrator who is reviewing them would recommend them for continued employment in the district.
Just as it is presently? Okay.
Well, and it also looks like, in addition to that, before that clicks in, you have to have had 2 years of teaching experience. Is
Yes.
that right?
Okay.
So it's not one or the other, it's both, right?
Right. So level 1, you are there for the first year of your career and the second year of your career. And as long as you're recommended for continued employment, then you move to level 2. And it works in the same way at level 2, only now you're in years 3, 4, and 5 of your career. And then if you're recommended for continued employment, then you move to level 3.
Does successful teaching experience, what does that mean?
That's what they were just talking about.
Okay.
And it's going to be hard to explain it without looking at the domains.
Oh,
Andrew
okay.
just said that's the definition, that it means that you were recommended for continued employment. But you have to look at that Danielson model. And there is a short, you gave us a short thing of it once.
I can
that
actually
we should
send
just
that to
carry.
everybody if we.
Actually, it'd be handy to link it with this next time we talk about it, because then people could look at that. Yeah. Because otherwise it's in that manual, but that's pretty
It's
cumbersome.
got a one-page.
You do, and
yeah,
it's very good,
It's
but yeah.
helpful, yeah.
Right.
You know, one thing you could do is you could have an index in the back and reference that at that point, so that instead of me asking the question, I can see a number 1 and I footnote it and I go back and read the footnote.
Okay, so you have managed to complete 5 years in the district. You're recommended for continued employment, and now you have reached level 3, which is professional teacher. The minimum criteria here are that you have obtained your professional educator license and that you have had 5 years of teaching experience. This is a level where a teacher may or may not move on to level 4 or level 5. They may remain in this level 3 for the entire rest of their career here. For performance expectations here, we expect these teachers to actively participate in our district required professional development. Maybe they're even leading some professional development. They're going to continue to complete PDPs and maintain their professional educator license, and we expect them to also have satisfactory performance evaluations. We will want to continue to employ them here in the district. For some teachers, they may wish to apply to be in level 4, which is our master teacher level. The minimum criteria for this level are that they have a professional educator license or a master educator license, that they also have a pre-approved master's degree, and that they have 8 years of teaching experience. The performance expectations here are that they demonstrate formal or informal leadership, that we have some evidence of exemplary teaching, and again, exemplary is one of those words that we are still tossing around and need to define and have consistent terms throughout our documents, so that's something that we are working on, but for now we've chosen the word exemplary. That they have exemplary leadership in teaching, that they have evidence of exemplary district school team leadership, that maybe there's some other evidence of exemplary practice. They will also need to complete PDP and maintain their professional educator license or have a master educator license, and they also need to have satisfactory performance evaluations. And we'll come back to the process for what they need to do in order to advance to a level 4 master teacher. We have also created a top level of a level 5. So somebody who's been in level 4. Yes?
I just had a couple of questions about 4. So you said pre-approved master's degree. So I have a teacher that moves into the district that's an experienced teacher that has a master's degree. So this says, I'm saying no. So can we use language, let's say that master's degree is in an area that, what this says is that we have to pre-approve it before they can qualify for level 4. that somebody that already has it, that might fit or match somebody exactly that we pre-approved, we're gonna say no to.
Right, I don't think that that is our intent.
So you need to fix
Right.
the language
Right, we
then.
will fix the language.
How about approve?
Well, I think part of this is, this applies to people who are here. If we're gonna hire a new person and they have a master's degree, we wouldn't make the hire if we didn't approve their degree, correct? Because we had this discussion in the committee, because you're right, it was, so when people look at this, they could be hired.
So
in-
we hire him at level 3, this person has a master's degree, and everything else fits because it isn't a pre-approved master's degree. So what I'm suggesting is you think about that as a committee, you may want to take pre out and just have approved, because then that leaves you open to approve ones that are already there and ones that are coming up.
That's a good thought.
It's just a suggestion, again.
It is.
Yeah, I'm trying to think
As
why
soon as you say
we-
pre-approved,
We didn't
You've
think about it in
eliminated
those
that.
terms.
We
but I
didn't think
that's-
about it in those terms,
I think
yeah.
that's right.
But we talked about grandfathering in people who already have them, who are in our district, clearly. I mean, that we
but
did.
if you write this right,
Yeah.
then you
Yeah.
can
You
put
could
it
go-
It doesn't have to say pre.
It doesn't have to be
Just say
pre-approved, it has the
period.
same effect
Right, to say approved, you're right.
to say approved.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
And then the
I-
other thing, I think, is exactly what Nicole was talking about. I mean, I'm gonna read this, and I don't know what exemplary leadership in teaching or exemplary district leadership means, and I have 4 kids, and I'm at home, and I'm a single mom. So, but I'm one of the best teachers you have, because I'm really meeting the needs of our kids. So, and I have a master's degree that I brought when I came here from McFarland. So so what I want us to do is really make sure that we don't eliminate highly talented, qualified teachers by this language. That
It won't
we-
happen.
Yeah, could I suggest that with some of these questions, we wait till we go through the whole thing and then come back?
Okay,
to some
I
of
was
this,
just
'cause
thinking, she
I
just did level 4, so.
Yeah, no, right, but we're coming back, I mean, yeah.
Okay.
One other thought to keep in mind is as we're describing the framework, we've really been working at it from the point of view as somebody entering the district with no experience. And that's been our frame of reference as we're building it up. And the issues you're raising are excellent ones that we've talked about in the committee, but we haven't finalized language or procedures to accommodate them yet.
See,
Because
then
we see them as
then I
transition
just wait
issues.
until you
Yeah.
finalize it, yeah.
Right,
that
but
sounds good.
the points you raise are excellent ones.
Okay.
But I think the fact, when we'll go down your list, because I think there are other factors here. that-
Right, you're gonna get to some more, that's what I meant. When
Oh.
we go to complete the whole PowerPoint, you won't necessarily get to all the stuff you're asking, but some of it, so
Okay,
it might be helpful to just wait
Okay.
if we can, yeah.
All right. So level 5 builds upon level 4, and that it has some similar minimum criteria of that you have a professional educator or master educator license, that you have a master's degree or a doctoral degree, but here you need to have 11 years of experience. For our performance expectations, they are also similar, but we have chosen a different term, which we also is one of the terms that we need to clarify and be consistent about. Here we have chosen the word distinguished, and that's the key word that we'll be coming back to. So here you need to demonstrate formal and informal leadership, have evidence of distinguished teaching, have evidence of distinguished leadership in teaching, evidence of distinguished district, school, team leadership, perhaps some other evidence of distinguished practice. You need to complete your PDP, maintain your license, and have satisfactory performance evaluations. So you need to be continued, or recommended for continued employment. But beyond that, levels 4 and 5, you need to apply to be a part of, and there is a review panel that will be making recommendations to the superintendent on that. But before we get to that, I'm just going to mention that for each of these levels, we have proposed salary ranges. So that is what the salary structure is going to look like. For level 1, our entry level salary is $38,000, which is the base salary that we currently have. And we said the maximum that an individual will get in that level will be $42,000. And we do have the asterisk there, just that we may need to exceed it for hard to fill positions. Level 2, we would have an entry of $41,000 and a maximum there of $46,000. Level 3, we would have an entry of 45,000 with a maximum of 67,000. That is a very large range for a reason. As we stated before, level 3 is a level at which many teachers may spend their entire career, so we wanted to have that maximum high enough that you could move along that throughout your career and still be paid a good wage. Master teacher, entry level there would be 55,000 with a maximum of 72,000. On level 5 for distinguished teacher, we have an entry of 64,000 and a maximum of 77,000. In terms of how you would advance through those levels, we have.
Can I go back to
Sure.
that previous slide? Dan, would it be appropriate to say where all of our teachers would fit at the present time? Is that still the case?
It is.
That they will, our current teacher salaries will all fit into level 3. Okay? So basically, we're offering new levels of opportunity for salary and professional advancement to levels 4 and 5.
That's exactly right. Right now, that maximum of $67,000 is pretty close to what our maximum is that we have right now for individual teachers. We've talked a lot about what should it be, what does the market look like, and that's something we're still evaluating. The market's still establishing itself in post-Act 10, and so that number certainly could change, but right now, as Dean said, that's exactly, it fits where our current salary structure is.
And I've been harping, because we adopted that we want to have comparables. And I keep asking for comparables, and the answer I get, they can't get comparables. And as part of the answer, I don't know if this was just to satisfy my prompting, but that we're out in front on this and they're waiting for us. Is that part of it?
We did hear that from one district at least.
Yeah, most
Sometimes
districts
probably
don't have a plan right now. They just, whatever the salary, it's kind of like we've been doing the last 2 years, whatever the salary is, giving, some sort of an increase, but as far as how that plan, everyone's kind of in the process of developing that. So that's why when we look at comparables, yeah, we can get a list of other teacher salaries in other districts, but why they get those salaries, we don't know. There's not a schedule that's aligned to it.
Actually, at WSB, that one morning, there were 4 workshops on the teacher compensation plans of 4 different school districts.
Right.
So we know there are some, so I wouldn't say.
That's Dane
In
County.
Dane County, yeah.
Oh, that helps, okay.
Yeah.
Because it's
That's-
our
That's our
that's what we're
comparables.
looking at, that's for our.
So when we looked at the proposed salary ranges, we looked at our ranges that we currently have, because obviously budget is a major factor, but we don't want it to be the only factor to keep our salaries down. If we could have the amount of funds that we truly need to compensate our teachers, what would that look like? And then we took our 8 comparable schools and we looked at those. And one of the things is like what we've done over the last couple of years is that we went away from a salary structure where it was year 1 you got this, year 2 you got this, year 3 masters and so on, to them just giving a CPI or an annual increase. And so when we asked the question, could you tell us what you're starting, we were able to identify from our 8 comparables their starting and their max, but we couldn't be able to identify if someone was 5 years with a master's. Now we can pull off of DPI's 1202 report based on what the reporting, but it wasn't necessarily a structure of this is what the school district had. It was just sort of one of those carry through things. So based on that, we believe that our starting and our maximum is within our comparables, and that we're not way out in front, but we're not way behind.
So is that the answer, basically the answer to the question in terms of how I think it's really important that publicly we're very clear on how those salary ranges were determined.
So those were a couple of the points, but then the other part that we looked at is we started with our level 1, and once we identified what that career ladder looked like, and we said that they need to be in there for 2 years, how much, if they got an annual increase, what would that bring them to? And then that put us to level 2, and they were there for 3 years, and what would that bring us to? Then we looked at level 3 as an area that, if, say, 80% of our teachers want to stop there, we want to make sure that's a decent salary for an individual. But then we also added level 4. So when we looked at those, we also then created the midpoint, which is just a halfway between the starting and the end, as a way of trying to move people up to the midpoint faster. So if you look at our old salary schedule, you'll see that we're moving people through the schedule much faster to get them to level 3, which will then give them a larger lifelong earnings than our previous schedule, in hopes that then that way we also are compensating them faster, which then puts us, in a way to attract and retain, which has been one of our goals. So, and the entry and the maximums will have to be annually looked at by the board. So if we find that the market is moving forward with $38,000 and everybody's moving to $48,000, we will have to make a market adjustment to our entry level. If we find the maximums increasing, then we need to make sure we move that. But this is just giving a salary range, and that's what seems to be most top districts are talking about. But in Dane County, Sun Prairie has a alternative compensation plan that they've just went to this year, which is truly based on professional development hours, not on longevity. And then Wanakee has their point system. And those would be the two, and DeForest is looking at it, but no one's been able to give us data on what theirs is exactly looking like. So.
Would you consider doing one or two things? One, add one more slide right here that summarizes what you just said. So that people don't just look at this number, they look at what you thought about and how you got there. And then on page 4, where you do proposed salary ranges, right there under maximum could be exceeded for hard, put a paragraph right there. I think it's just critical for people that haven't been observing the process. That's going to be one of the first questions they ask. How did you get to these numbers? And if you have Jared just explained it, so let's give that to everybody in the documents that you have and then in the PowerPoint that you put out.
I think the final report, we have all the information, I think, that can, because we've gone through it a lot, and I think in the final report, those will easily be bullet pointed things, but it is needed information. And I think our consultant has helped on this, particularly this piece, getting us to, I don't know if it's thinking new way, got me to thinking a new way of salaries and how to calculate them. And I think I mentioned it before, the consultant also, to do this manipulation in many ways, Jared now has the ability in that program, because she and you got all of our current staff in there to where we can constantly manipulate that on degrees and that sort of thing, can't we?
Yep.
And so in the future, I think if we want to change one of these variables, unless we add a brand new variable, that we'll be able to do that and see what the impact is immediately.
Yes.
Is that, we're in pretty good shape to make the adjustments on it, I think.
I'm just saying you can't read your mind.
What?
I can't read your mind. So those pieces that were just explained are so good and so well said. Just take
What
a
I
couple
just said
lines
was
and-
so well said?
Right.
Or what he
I'm
said?
suggesting you put it, actually, I was talking about Jared. Sorry.
Okay.
But you
I'm
do.
going to give him credit. The question was, how do you determine those numbers? And he answered that question. I think it's important,
Yeah.
particularly as we go out into the community in a listening session.
Right,
Oh.
yeah.
To have that up there.
You're absolutely right.
That was the last. Just made my night.
Okay, so we have proposed salary ranges for each of the levels, but then there's the question of how do you advance through those salary levels? Jared?
Oh, sure. So obviously, as we were looking at developing a alternative compensation plan, we also have to follow the law, and that requires some bargaining. So the fixed annual increase is what we would classify during our bargaining session. That's what we would utilize, that CPI number. So everybody would technically get this annual increase each year. The career advancement increase is where we talked about, actually in the document, I think everybody has as a definition as well.
Page 3.
Page 3,
Yeah.
thank you. So this was an increase which we've been utilizing as a supplemental pay. So every 3 years, a individual would receive this career advancement increase, and that would be set annually by the Board of Education. And that would fluctuate based on obviously what our budget is. But the key of it is that right now, CPI is 1.62%. Well, that's not necessarily going to move a person along that salary range very quickly. But the other part of it is that we want to reward people for being with the district. It's not tied to any evaluation. As long as they're going to continue moving on, working in the district, then after that, they will get that 3-year bump. The level advancement is where an individual, like if they were moving from a level 1 to a level 2, they would get the level advancement. So that would be based on if they came in at the starting salary, then if they moved to level 2, we would bring them at the starting. So they would always see an increase as they move through each of those levels. And there is actually a formula that would be utilized. We're looking at keeping them, so it's not like if they move from level 1 to level 2, one group of people are getting $1,000, where another group of people are going to get $2,000. We will make sure that it's an equal movement for employees. So if someone's brought in at $38,000 and they move to level 2, they're going to get the same type of increase that someone was at $42,000 coming in. So they're not seeing a larger spread of increase by moving levels. And then when we look at the level 4 or 5, we would look at a % increase because they're moving in, and there's also additional duties that potentially could be assigned to that. The below entry adjustments. So one of the things that we have to look at is when we bring someone in, and obviously budget constraints might put the district in a situation where if we bring someone in at level 1 and they're supposed to move to level 2, or they're currently being paid at $38,000 and they should be in level 3, they might be entitled to like $10,000 to get them to where they're supposed to be at. But if the budget doesn't allow us to necessarily have, this is telling us that we need to give that person that amount to bring them up to where they should be at. Similar to what we've done in the past with administrators when we brought them in and we brought them up to where the board wants them, it's getting them up to that entry level or that adjustment to where they should be at the level.
And that may be done in one shot or?
It might be done 1 shot, 2 shots, 3 years, but that's something that we have to have a plan for, so individuals are aware of that. And that's where that transition comes from, moving from our current salary schedule over to that and being able to, what I'm working on right now is applying the current stuff, and that will change some of those things, but being able to make sure that we find out who's below the level that they're supposed to be making and how much would that cost the district to get them caught up. And then an annual stipend for district-approved advanced lanes. So right now what we're looking at is an individual that has a master's degree would get an additional $2,000. And if they have a doctorate degree, they would get an additional $2,000 stipend each year.
Each year?
Each year.
For their
continuous
career.
On into their career. So if you see someone at $38,000 that's a bachelor's degree, if they come in with a master's degree and it's been approved, the district would give them $2,000. So they would really be making $40,000.
That's in addition for us paying for the credits.
In addition to us paying for 50% of the graduate credits.
Every year.
Every year.
So you don't just get it after you get it.
It stays
And
with you.
It's
I
not
get
a-
an additional $2,000 every year.
Yes.
Now, that also says district approved, so do we have the same issue? I mean,
So I think something else side we have to
that's where,
evaluate.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
That's in addition to moving into, let's say I had a teacher that moves into level 4.
Right, because it isn't the only criteria, there's other criteria.
Because
in
if
these
they're
levels.
here 10 years, that's $20,000. If they're at a $40,000 salary,
Mhm.
and now they move into tier 4, they qualify for tier 4, they would then qualify for a range of 55 to 72, plus another $2,000 for another 10 years.
That's where we left the conversation.
But you don't automatically get to level 4 with a master's degree, you have to have these
No,
other
you have to work there, but I'm
qualifications.
just
Right,
saying
right.
that.
So it's not, everybody's not ever gonna land there, is what I'm saying.
Well, okay, so use the example of level 3, it doesn't matter.
As long as you get a master's degree that's been approved by the district, you will get that $2,000 annual stipend.
That's the current plan.
That's the
Instead
current
of
plan.
just saying, okay, I got it.
And just as a comparison, under the old salary schedule, even though you didn't get it, you got it in, lane increments, it was actually worth $4,000 to $5,000 a year to earn that master's. Now granted, the district wasn't paying for tuition, so in the short term, it did, but in the long term, someone that was in the district for a long time, so that was the idea, is to try to find a little bit more balance. We want to honor the master's, but not at such extreme level as the old system did.
And you're honoring the masters at the same level as you are a doctorate.
Well, the doctor's an additional two, so it'd be worth $4,000.
So you get 4, yeah.
Yeah.
You might want to clarify
Well-
that, because it looks like the doctorate is 2,000.
Well, it is, but if you already have the master's, you're already getting that 2,000, so now you're getting another one if you get a doctorate, so it's pretty.
I need a little perimeter.
What you forgot, Susan, is what happens to the person who gets a doctorate but doesn't get the master's.
That's what I was just
intermediate.
thinking, because that's right.
Good point, good point.
Yeah, but,
I'm like the MGEA sitting in our meeting and thinking of all the exceptions and
Right.
the people I know and.
So maybe you maybe you add a third one there on that page and it says masters and doctorate, and that would be 4. So you could see that? Is that right?
Oh, and just
Well-
pull them, sure.
well, but you're not gonna get, you won't, somebody who has a master's is already getting that stipend, so that's already their salary. And now we're gonna give them another 2,000 when they get their doctorate, we're not gonna give them another 4. So it'd be more confusing to do what you just said, I think.
Wait, I thought you just said you would.
Well,
Somebody do that again.
They're getting that already, is what I'm saying. They're already getting the salary that they're getting within adding that stipend.
If I have
And
a
now we're gonna add another 2,000 when they get a doctorate.
Right.
So it does equate to 4.
It isn't
but
clear
it's-
from this that if you have both,
Okay, well, we can think about that.
that you get
Yeah,
both. I mean, it's just
yeah.
adding a line right there.
We
It's-
can think about it, yeah. Okay, so,
Are you
On the next
suggesting those
slide.
are too generous, perhaps, for?
No, I'm just asking for clarification in the report on page 4. Because Susan did make an excellent point, and that was, if you have a doctorate but not a master's, you're just gonna get the 2,000 for the doctorate.
Yeah, I just,
yeah.
Okay,
I
That should
No,
be
that
understand.
was-
that, yeah.
I got it.
Anyway, we can think about that more.
Okay. So in our original career ladder, we actually had a 6th level, and it had to deal with our teacher leader positions, but in thinking about it more, we actually pulled it off the ladder, and it's kind of somewhere off to the side, floating in space, and it's our teacher leader positions. And these are specific roles that we have that are in addition to or in lieu of classroom teaching assignments. So currently, the positions that we have would be the full release mentor, our TOSAs, and the MG21 lead teacher. What we are proposing here is that these individuals serving in these roles will receive an annual stipend of $6,000 while they are holding these positions. Currently, for something like the TOSA, they have an extended day contract, which they are paid at their per diem rate, I believe, for 15 days. So we thought, instead of kind of parsing it out in terms of days, we'll give them a stipend, and then they just get the job done with however many days, however many hours it takes to do it, instead of having to track days and hours. So we're trying to professionalize it a little bit with the stipend.
That's like an additive, right, under our current thinking.
That's right.
So what about that teacher, I'm thinking about teacher at Winnequa that was actually doing professional development? Because, I mean, other schools are compensating that teacher better. Where does that fit?
It's already covered.
Do
in
they
the-
fit in that
No.
teacher leader position?
No.
Currently in our handbook, we have, that last section talks about all those additional ways that you can earn pay, and I think one of them is for,
Just for
teachers,
workshops,
trained
right.
teachers, and that all those hourly rates that are in the handbook are still in the handbook, and they're still going to apply. They haven't been folded into this compensation plan. But it might actually apply to somebody who is applying to be a level 4 or level 5 teacher.
Because it becomes evidence of leadership.
Exactly.
Right. So,
So as we said before, that the process for advancement to levels 4 and 5 isn't just a recommendation of continued employment, and an individual actually has to take some steps in order to get there and have a portfolio reviewed by a committee.
You finally used that word, wonderful.
I know, I saw you stuck it back in here. Every time I'm
We're
not
gonna
here,
have to
you
get
stick it.
therapy for
I give
Susan.
up, I give up. You can use it.
Oh, sure. So I'll share a little bit about this. We had a work group of myself and Ann Schrader and Connie Hazley and 3 teachers, Cheryl Barrick, Nicole Northester, and Nikki Hafley, spent 2 days to really dig into what would the evidence need to look like to come forward in a portfolio, what would the process for reviewing the portfolio be. And so this is you have a more lengthy description of that in the draft document that's in executive content. This is a summary, obviously, but the big difference from moving from level 3, the professional level, to level 4, the master teacher level, is there are 2 big things. First, the outstanding classroom practices, excellent teaching. You see words exemplary teaching here. There has to be evidence of really outstanding teaching coming forward in the portfolio, and that evidence is going to be assessed against a rubric that's based on the Wisconsin Master Educator Licensure Review process. So that's a process that already exists. The review materials we can already use those. They're developed by DPI. The members of our review panel can participate in training, even through to be master educator reviewers themselves, which would lend itself here. So that's a big piece of it, is the evidence of teaching. The second piece of the evidence that's required is evidence of leadership for level 4, and that can be formal leadership, which is, for example, serving as a grade level coordinator or another additive role that we currently have in place. That could be presenting professional development for staff in a formal way. Those are just a couple of examples of formal leadership. Or the teacher could bring forward evidence of informal leadership, which is described in much more detail in the document. But informal leadership can be opening your classroom for a beginning teacher to come and do an observation and watch you teach. If I'm a veteran teacher, I'll invite a beginning colleague into my room, talk about what I'm going to do, have them observed, and then debrief afterwards. And that's not a formal paid job description thing. That's just good collaborative, informal leadership. Being recognized as a go-to expert in a particular content area or in a set of instructional strategies and being willing to share that. Those are just a couple examples of informal leadership. So when a teacher brings forward a portfolio, the teacher will prepare that. The principal will need to certify that the portfolio of evidence addresses the different criteria and that it's representative of the teacher's work. And then it goes to the review panel. And then the review panel will obviously review that and then make a recommendation to the superintendent. The process is very similar for level 4, moving to level 5. The difference really in the criteria is that at level 5, we're looking for evidence of both formal and informal leadership in a teacher's portfolio. And so that sets a higher standard. The indicators are the same. They're both drawn from the master educator license. We're looking for informal and informal, and then more evidence in each of the categories in teaching as well.
I have 2 questions. Is the supervising administrator, in most cases that's the principal, can the principal stop the advance of that or reviews it with recommendation? Does it go on? If the teacher wants it to go on with presumably some will be comment or something like that, or does the principal stop that process at that point and simply say, I'm going to stop it here, the review committee will never see it, or I will insert my commentary that the committee will see it and the superintendent sees it, so it gets stopped later on maybe. So
that's a really
have we decided that?
We didn't frame the question quite the way you did. What we talked about in the materials we brought forward was a principal needs to endorse the portfolio to move forward. And so absent that endorsement, my assumption would he would not move forward. We would certainly want the principal to give good, clear feedback to the teacher on why it's not ready to go. But we didn't frame it quite the way you did in your question, but that's
Yeah,
that's
as
the
is
idea.
now, the
Yeah.
proposal would be that it would stop without that endorsement.
Okay. So
But feedback is really critical because the teacher needs to know what's missing or what could be improved upon.
ultimately, I
Correct.
think there needs to be an asterisk on that, or not to make another line or something, but review has, to me, it's more passive than what you described.
Mhm. Term we used, I think, was endorse.
Yeah.
Review and forward or something like that, you know.
Yeah,
You want to soften the language a little bit, but it's,
So here we have just a little bit more enumeration of the different categories of evidence we're looking for in teaching, and these are all drawn from, as I said, from the Wisconsin Master Educator Assessment Process, which is very similar to the, there are a limited number of content areas that use this process. Many content areas use national boards, which is very similar. But these are the different categories of evidence: organization and planning of instruction, classroom instruction meets the needs of all learners, classroom environment that promotes student learning, formal and informal assessment, collaboration with colleagues, family, leadership, community, reflective practice and professional growth, and then the last one is formal/informal leadership, and as I mentioned earlier, in level 4 it could be either of those, and level 5 would be looking for evidence of both.
I would add another one on there and simply say, other evidence that you may wish to submit.
Certainly.
So these do not look restrictive categories.
Okay. As we mentioned before, there are some items that teachers are compensated for that are not included in this career ladder framework. Those be the co-curricular compensation or additive compensation and those hourly pay categories in the teacher handbook. They will all remain as is for now and separate from this career ladder framework. So what is next? As we mentioned at the beginning, we do plan on doing school visits and listening sessions. As we mentioned, we will be revising that document that you've seen, these process documents. We need to finalize the advancement criteria for specialists. Seth, you want to mention?
Yeah, before he jumps in, one thing I think is missing as chair of the committee is emphasis on that they must have the DPI approved professional development plan and show progress on that. I think that's been in our other categories. So I think that is, you know, I know you put this together on a getting up for the program, but when we look at it, but I think, because I think the goal was to integrate PI 34, which is the DPI licensure requirement, which they also require the professional development plan be a continuous process. And we've also tried to deal with educator effectiveness and integrate those two with all of this too. So one of the criteria running through all of this, which is a bullet point lacking in all of them, is the professional development plan. I think it's assumed, but I think it ought to be specified.
So what you've heard discussed has been based on the teacher's role. We are working on a very similar document and set of criteria for our specialists. So those would be our school psychologists, counselors, social workers, occupational therapists, physical therapists, and speech language people. There is a companion document that Andrew has sent on to the group I'm working with. It is the Wisconsin Master Educator License for Pupil Services staff, and so we'll be basing our work on that document, and that will also be, we'll get an update to you once that work's done. But the plan was to finalize this part for teachers and then go back and retrofit it to those in specialist roles.
We're lucky to have one or two of your people
On the committee.
in there that every time we were coming to a conclusion, they'd raise their hand and say, that's not me.
That has been helpful, actually. Yeah.
Okay, so develop HR forms. What we mean by that is for that level 4 and level 5 advancement, there's a lot of criteria that will need to be met. It would just be very helpful if we had different checklists that we can go by to help keep people organized and understanding what they need to do for the process. We also need to develop some timelines for these level 4 and level 5 advancement and that review process. And of course, this all needs board approval as well.
I think there's one piece that, remember we have the master teacher license in there? And I think one of the things that we said master teacher, but we didn't make it categorical. But the criteria, am I correct? The criteria that you have to submit is the same criteria that you'd have to submit for the master teacher license to the Department of Public Instruction. So in effect, Monona Grove would be granting its a master teacher status without the licensure. I guess that would be it. And so somebody could go get their master teacher license. It might be easier just to forget about DPI and just go through our process and that sort of thing. But be nice to probably for them to have it if they're doing it. But there was a lot of resistance to have to go apply for another license and pay for the license, and conceivably they may not get it for some DPI reason that we wouldn't recognize. So I think what we do, just download it's a big thick thing, about 1.5 inches thick of documentation for master teacher license, and I suppose what you've done is just take the relevant passages out of that for this process. So in effect, we have reached that goal too.
They'll end up with a really big portfolio.
Well, I can tell you that Joyce has 3-ring notebooks that are really thick.
Yes, she does. All right. So any other questions, comments, or? So part of this developing timelines for level advancement review is because, as Dan mentioned, most of our teachers are going to come in at a level 3, and there was a lot of anxiety about, well, how long is it going to take them to move up into 4 and 5? And it's tricky because it's how much money do we have to do that to, so it's a budgetary issue as well as an administrative time issue, so that's part of that timeline. Okay, well, thank you.
It's pretty amazing.
Thank you.
It is pretty amazing, yes. Yeah. And thank you for all the extra work you did outside of the committee to finalize these criteria. All right, then,
A lot of work. It's taken a while for a lot of people, but I think we're going to have a breakthrough when we're done.
Pretty
Yeah.
amazing. And
Or a
to see
breakdown.
the teamwork, it's really amazing.
Yeah, it's.
so I think we will move on to the next item is the preliminary 2015-16 certified staff suspensions.
Okay. All right, this is a preliminary plan. Just want to start the discussion about what our needs are, and it's based strictly on maintaining class size within reasonable, not only board policy with guidelines, but also what we think are reasonable. And so if you look at the first document that is attached, this shows all of our K-8 sections, and Jared put this document together. We've met with the principals, reviewed the projected enrollments for next year. In most cases, it's just a cast forward from what the grade enrollment is currently moving forward, and then looking at how many sections it would take to either maintain the class size or, re-looking at what those guidelines are. In some cases, taking into account that we know we might very well have students move in over the summer and have some flexibility if we do have a few additional students in those sections, what it would do to those class sizes. And so this is an initial recommendation that in grades K-8 to add a total of 6 new teaching positions in order to maintain or keep our classes within our guidelines. Now with that, you'll see in the projected enrollment is an increase of from current of 3285 to 3368, so just under 100 students. But because of how they play out in each grade level, it's not that simple. So Jared put this document together. Why don't we stop there and take any questions on the K-8 class sizes, number of recommended sections, comments, questions on any part of that. And we can talk about the budgetary, pieces with that here in a minute as well, but just looking at class sizes.
Any salient deviations from recent practice?
not necessarily, we're just trying to really focus on that goal area.
Right.
So, and we probably there might have been a few sections in here that in the past, we might have not went to the goal because it was 1.25 over. This year, we've worked really hard unless it was gonna put us below that minimum.
So your tendency was to make your decisions to move towards the goal
Yes.
and away from the maximum.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, right now it looks like that.
I mean, there's still a few that, like if you look at Cottage Grove fourth grade, 6 sections, 24 students, the goal's 23. However, if we added a 7th section there, we'd actually be below the 18, which is, and then looking at what 5th grade is at Winnequa, trying, so at least the grade levels are sort of consistent throughout the district as
Yeah,
well.
Grade 8 also,
Yeah,
similar,
so,
but same
same
number,
concept.
so. Susan?
Well, and what's great about this is we can really watch this now instead of coming back next September or October and saying, we have classes of 31 kids in our honors at the high school. I mean, again, this is awesome because we already know what we're going to be watching. I'm watching the 8th grade sections
Mhm.
at Glacial Drumlin. And if over the summer you get 7 new kids, I mean, I'm saying a
Right.
lot,
Yep.
which can happen, then, again, this helps everybody. It helps Paul at the high school and Renee, and it helps us be able to support you.
Do you have any control over the assignment of kids to these classes that would be, for whatever reason, it could be some special education categories, but that would be management, pupil management issues? It seems to me class size, one of the factors I think that people notice is the class sizes grow, and if it's at random, it's more likely you'll get 3 rather than 2 or 2 rather than 1, not of particularly students that maybe it might be medication, it might be some other disruptive type of thing. It makes a lot of difference on the classroom management, and it kind of defies just everybody at 23.
Yeah.
Because you may want to have another class at 25 and compensate at 22.
Yeah.
Because those are the kinds of things that I read about or observe, that the teachers are distracted, particularly when there's only one person that you can telephone in the office to come and help.
Well, the principals do have that discretion. In fact, they do look at it very carefully, particularly in the elementary schools, that certainly we want to have equity, have similar number of students in every section, but when they look at that, many times they are clustered, by needs, and so a particular section that might have more high-need students might have a few less students in that homeroom than another one, exactly as you described. So yes, the principals do manage that.
So that's going to be an operating procedure,
Yes.
the implementation.
Yeah, so that's why you see our averages, but it doesn't mean that every classroom has that number. You're right. And likewise, at the high school as well. That's something that Paul works really closely with the department, coordinators on those, depending on the classes as well, in making that determination about which ones really need to have lower class size versus higher, and whether they're honors or AP or whatever it is. They're very thoughtful about that and how they'll come out.
So Dan, do you guys have a breakout
So,
for the high school?
yep, so there are 2 documents as well
Okay.
for the high school. One document is a summary sheet showing just the number of FTEs. Now, you'll see an increase of 0.4 from the previous year. That's not any new teachers. Many times, the typical course or teaching load for a high school teacher is 5 courses plus a supervision. And then if they teach a 6th course, it's, an overload. And so Paul works closely with those departments to, ask a couple teachers to teach overloads to help reduce those class sizes and, keep it manageable. So this would not require hiring any new staff, it'd just be managing those teaching assignments for next year. And then there is a second document that actually shows the class sizes based on student requests, and that's where we're at right now, are strictly course requests. We know when they go through the master scheduling process that because of, in some cases, scheduling conflicts, Some students might end up taking different courses than they initially requested. Sometimes they'll change their request. But based upon that, it's pretty accurate information. And obviously, the number of years that Paul and his staff have gone through that, they have a pretty good idea of which types of courses you might see increase enrollment in between now and the start of the school year, which ones generally might go down, and so on. And so I think we feel very confident with the staffing recommendation based upon those student requests.
Well, it's nice to see it like this, because now you get a real good feel for how very difficult it is. So, I know it's so hard when you come in September and you're still getting kids flying into the high school, and all of a sudden we're looking at big numbers, and yeah, it's really nice. This makes it very clear to the community that you're looking at it right now.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about next steps and what we're doing with this, but any other questions or comments about these documents? Or? Okay, so with that, what we do want to get going, in the hiring season, and certainly the earlier we can start, hopefully the more highly qualified, candidates will be out there in our pool. So we'll bring this back again at the next board meeting. We'll ask for board a preliminary approval of this plan, and it is kind of advisory. Ultimately, you approve teacher contracts once they're hired. We also know we have a lot of questions about the state budget and our local budget. So we want to start the process of posting these positions. We will not hire any new teachers until we have more budget information, and to make sure we can afford, these 6 new positions.
Thank you for starting the process early.
Yeah.
So, this, and I think at this point, this will probably be an agenda item every meeting now for the next, few meetings, and we'll keep, up to date on that. So as you know, right now, when we have openings, we first have to post internally for 2 weeks. So we'd like to start that process to see if we have any teachers interested in transferring. Then we'll get them posted externally and kind of start that process. And in the meantime, hopefully we'll get some budget information that we can actually confirm that we can complete those hires. So like I said, we won't actually hire anyone until we have board approval with the budget, or at least a preliminary approval.
Okay.
So.
This is really, again, I
Right.
can't thank you enough for starting to work right now.
Moving on to action items. The first one, we're going to skip for now because we're not ready to do that. So we will move on to item 2 under action items, discussion and possible approval of a resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of $2 million taxable note. Anticipation note series 2015.
So Michelle from
Yeah,
PMA is
Michelle.
here. But
Thanks
this
for
is just
waiting.
the continued process of us borrowing our $2 million for the our retirements benefits to funds up to start out funding tier 3. Just as a reminder that what we do is, since this is per statute, we need to do a short-term sale, and then we'll come back at the end of the month and do a refinancing of this $2 million to make it a 20-year situation. And then at the same time, we will also bring another refinancing opportunity that's in Fund 39 at the same meeting. So, but the money that we do receive from this will not be deposited into anybody's retirement accounts until the trust document is approved by the board, which is scheduled to come at the April board meeting. We're actually talking again next week. So I just wanted to put that out there. I think that would help everybody understand where that process is, because it's tied together. But we will get the money. PMA will deposit the money into collateral, so it's completely protected. So we can do the process, to start the process. But no money will be deposited in anybody's accounts until we have the trust system set up.
Yeah, so as Jared said, this analysis here shows you the 2 phases of this financing. So this evening you would be approving the taxable note anticipation notes, which again is just the short-term financing that is required under statutes. You're looking at it here as it relates to other debt that is existing in Fund 38, so under revenue limits. And our thought here was to kind of wrap it around that debt that is out there and to amortize the eventual long-term financing, which you would approve in 2 weeks as a wraparound structure for a 20-year period. The notes before you for approval tonight, we again had to do via statutes and wanted to do kind of as quickly and painlessly as possible. So these are non-rated, and we placed them actually with the City of Madison. So the city of Madison is actually the purchaser of these notes, looking at it as an investment for their own portfolio.
Mhm.
I understand that you maybe knew Dave Gowenda in a former life.
He was a former Monona Grove teacher.
Oh, that's right, that's right. I
English
couldn't
teacher
remember the
at
connection.
Yeah.
I remembered it earlier today, I swear.
Childcare a
yes.
long time ago.
So, anyway, that's a great kind of bringing these parties together.
The city of Madison, is this an investment I could buy? Or City of Madison could buy? Or typically you go to some kind of
Yeah, it
financing
is.
firms, don't you?
I, as financial advisor to the district, can actually place it directly with the city of Madison. So,
Mhm.
as purchaser.
Okay,
Mhm. As an institutional purchaser, I'm not sure I could sell it directly to you.
okay.
So,
Well, it seems like you make money by being an institutional purchaser, don't you?
we charge no fee in placing that funds to them. Our fee only is financial advisor to the district. So we can't charge fees on both sides.
I'm getting to when can we be the
You
source
can
to-
be, in terms of, could you purchase
Do we have enough
other?
capital to get started to be
It's
a bank?
just a matter of, if it's something you're interested in, with some of your maybe longer term funds, absolutely. State statutes allow Wisconsin municipalities to buy other Wisconsin municipalities' debt offerings. So,
Interesting. Okay.
so that's the purchaser of tonight's notes, that's the resolution, before you this evening. 2 weeks from now, you'll see this takeout financing that we're talking about, as well as this refinancing, which is just let's see, this would be our 5th refinancing we've done with Monona Grove. We've done one a year. And this one is looking at savings of about $586,000. So again, you'd be locking that in 2 weeks. Once that is complete, your total savings over the course of those 5 refinancings would be about $2.8 million. So just kind of chipping away at that. So again, that's going to come back to you in a couple weeks, both the refinancing and then the long-term takeout. Tonight's resolution is just for that short term.
That'd make a good press release, wouldn't it?
Yes.
The 2.8 million?
So we
Didn't we
talked
talk
about
about that this
2
afternoon?
million?
We did.
Okay.
All right, then,
1% of that for you would go a long way.
It would help for poor kids in college.
Yes.
At the risk of sounding like a broken wheel, I do want to make the point again that this is, it looks like $2 million worth of new liability. It is not. It is an unfunded liability that we're monetizing at this point. It is real liability that we have, and we're not taking on something that isn't already, isn't already a liability we have.
Right. And Jessica, did you?
I just was gonna make a motion.
Well, you can go ahead.
I move approval of a resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of $2 million taxable note anticipation notes, series 2015 as presented.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so moved and seconded, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries, thank you
Thank
very much.
you.
Thank you. Thank you again for sitting around
No
for
problem.
2.5 hours.
I got some work done.
That's right. All right, so the next item is, just because the Joint Finance Committee is beginning to meet on the state budget, and I do seriously apologize for not getting these out earlier, but Peter, let me hand you a couple of this. I debated about resolution or letter, and I looked at WSB has posted on their webpage some sample resolutions that other districts have passed, and they also have sample letters. And I said, knowing that the legislators probably don't read letters when they get to 2 and 3 pages, I thought, well, maybe this is an easier way. And I tried to keep it pretty brief to just say we would like them to revisit the money, but I'll give you a minute to read through it. In the beginning, just talking about the elimination of the categorical aid, which we weren't counting on being eliminated. And that's the reduction that I got from Jared's figures from before that it would mean for us with that aid. And that we're in fact really getting a decrease, not an increase overall. And that the school levy credit and the general aid increase, none of that helps us at all because there's no revenue limit increase. Now, and I also mentioned, the WSB didn't have this, but I also mentioned the lack of an increase in special education categorical aid, just because we've talked about that quite a bit at the Wisconsin Public Education Network, that as being an issue, they should really be increasing that. And this is the sentence where it says, whereas only enrollment growth in the Monona Grove School District may offer some protection from forced budget reduction. I have a version here that doesn't have that sentence in it, because I didn't know if we wanted to put it in there or not. And that was supposed to be the change, but I think apparently I sent Joyce 2 copies of the same thing. So, and then the language here under the now therefore be it resolved, honestly, I got from other districts, so this was a suggested WSB language. Normally I don't copy it verbatim, but after playing with it for a while, I thought, well, really this is the best thing to say. Just generally to minimally restore school funding in 2015-17 to educationally adequate levels, to include no decrease in year one anticipated revenue, while also providing for inflationary revenue increases in both years. So it's just generally a statement. I just thought we should go on record while the the Joint Finance Committee is meeting, as asking them to please revisit this. I know there's some thinking that, well, I don't know if there is really or not, that they may actually reinstate the $150 per pupil, because it would look like they're giving us something, but we'll have to wait and see. So thoughts, Susan? All right.
Well, I guess one question I had was why you had the additional language about the enrollment growth. I might just.
I do have a version without that, and
I printed them both,
Oh, okay.
and I thought, you know,
I kinda thought that too.
I like it without it, just make
Yeah.
the statement, tell us where we are, because there are a lot of people, you know, what if we could take more open enrollment? And so I don't want to give them any leverage to say.
Well, it's not open enrollment, it's people moving in.
I get that,
right,
but
right.
it's similar thought process. So once you start down
I think
that
it
lane-
muddies it, yeah, I think it's
I would
better
just
not
leave it
to.
out, yep.
Yeah.
I think it's real nice and clean, I like the other
You're
one.
talking about the enrollment growth item.
Yeah, and I have a version that we
Yeah.
can sign without that in there, because after I typed it, I thought, I don't know if I want to say that, because it's, Jessica.
Kind
do you
of
have a
changes
comment?
the thrust of it.
It does a little bit, yeah.
No, I agree with what Susan just said.
Okay.
How would we handle that motion-wise?
We would approve, I called that revision 2, actually.
That one is on board docs.
And it's on board docs as well. It's the second, here's that.
Oh, okay.
It's the second edition, the second
So
revision.
you have.
And I have another hard copy, so I brought one
Yeah.
so we can sign it tonight, and I'll take it to Jeff and get him to sign it. He may be going home.
I have one other,
He is going, yeah.
I have one other.
Oh, he's coming here?
Friday.
Really? Oh, okay.
He's still not.
I have one other deletion.
Yes. Oh, then.
On the resolve part there,
Uh-huh.
on the first line of the resolve part, I'd remove respectfully.
Well,
Talk to
the only reason I might object to that is because then we have to all get together again to sign this, if I take it out. But, yeah, I put it in there trying to be nice.
I had tongue in cheek on that, but that looks
No,
like that's resolution lingo.
Right, yeah, well, actually, I put that in, that was not in the
Did
WSB
you?
one, I did try to be nice, as I said.
It was fast.
Strong.
Strongly
said that.
encouraged.
Make the motion.
Yes, go ahead.
I move approval of resolution 2
Okay,
regarding the governor's budget
right.
proposal as presented.
Is there a second?
Gotta have a little fun,
Do we have a second?
Second, sorry. I'm usually fighting for that.
Someone wants to second it? I'll second it, okay. Oh, you did second it, I'm sorry.
I did.
Okay. So it's moved and seconded that we approve the second resolution. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion
Here,
carries.
did you have any, you didn't vote?
Yes, I did.
So before you
My voice
leave,
vote is whatever she said.
sign one or two of these, and I'll make sure Jeff, we get Jeff's
Do you,
signature as
do you
well.
have a,
A pen.
You have one, why don't you pass?
yes.
Yeah.
We all have.
Actually, just sign 2 of them, just in case I want to.
Sure.
I mean, just in case I still copy on one of them.
Probably
Yeah,
not.
what?
Great. All right, future agenda items, I don't think we,
On my computer.
That's just a
I think we've got a list of future agenda items, unless somebody has something else burning. Future meetings, policy committee meets next week, and
At
long-range planning
5:15?
on Monday, 5:15. Oh, yeah, we've changed that meeting time to 5:15,
So we can go to the.
so we go to the
orchestra.
strings concert at
Wait.
7 o'clock.
Wait a second.
What was that meeting?
Did I send you the wrong one?
If you want 2 copies of resolution 2, that's the one.
Yep.
Something came up.
And then the long-range planning committee meets at 6:30, and that will be at Cottage Grove School.
Cottage Grove
Correct?
School.
It says, it doesn't say Robbins here, but Cottage Grove School. All right. Then, could I have a motion to adjourn? I'm sorry, what?
To go to closed.
Oh, right.
Yeah, you almost really screwed up.
I did. That's hard. Too bad I didn't get away with that. All right, I'm sorry, that's correct. I didn't announce that at the beginning. We will be reconvening in closed session, and we will just adjourn from closed session. So, but before we go in, back in there, can we get this signed so I can be done with it? At the end of the 10.
Will we have to come back to open session at the end of the closed
No, we
session?
don't. No, we'll talk about that. No, we got a legal opinion on that.